Alright, it's gonna be another long one. We already went through all winning matchups, and now we're gonna talk about the matchups that I think could have a case for them being winning, but also have a case for them being even in practice. So, Duck Hunt. This matchup is a very, very slow one. This is because Duck Hunt, as a character, typically likes to sit back and zone a bit, right? And then you'd think, as a K-Rool player, we have some tools to help zone break, right? Yep, you would be correct on that. We have ourselves the armor, we have Crown that has armor of its own on there. We also have massive hitboxes that can clank with projectiles or even just send, say, the can back when it's coming at us. So that's pretty nice. Another thing to also think about is the sustain K-Rool has. So even if it can be difficult for K-Rool to get in, he can afford to make those mistakes more against Duck Hunt. Not only is there this massive weight discrepancy, there's also the scope of Duck Hunt's ability to land kill confirms. Duck Hunt's ranges of which he can actually accomplish this are fairly narrow, and if you know how to play around those ranges, he's going to struggle a lot to seal out K-Rool stocks. Now, the reason why I think it could be potentially even is the threat of circle camping, as well as the fact that both Can and Clay Pigeon, which are the two projectiles Duck Hunt's going to be predominantly using, and Gunman's going to be used sometimes, but those are the main two that I would be looking at in terms of figuring out how to play against Duck Hunt. So if I were to pull him up here, it's frame for a jab, similar boxing. Yep, Can and Clay Pigeon. Both of these are moves that can break the crown armor, although they do depend on staleness. Another thing to note though is that since Clay Pigeon has multiple hits, it can cause K-Rool to be stuck in hit lag for so long for Duck Hunt to follow up or just shield the crown anyway. So if you do not time the crown in specific ways against Clay Pigeon, you can be stuck and just be punished for trying to tank through stuff. Now you can hit it out of the air, though it can sometimes be tricky to do so, since there is a hitbox if you were to like shoot at it. Yeah, this thing. If you were to just shoot at it, there is massive hitboxes, see here. The first hit, second hit, and then the third is just massive. So if they're keen on how they can time their Clay Pigeon, it can be difficult to actually get in onto them. So it becomes a situation of who wins in the long run, which is why I'm kind of like conflicted, where Duck Hunt does have this means to run away, and if they are adept enough with using Clay Pigeon and Can well, they can either keep K-Rool in lag of his crown and then just bop him for it, or even just utilize clever use of Can to break the armor, or even force him into other hit lag scenarios or just into shield. As you can imagine, being put into shield is unideal when the alternative is to actually hit your opponent, right? Alright, Piranha Plant. Here's one of those matchups that I also get a significant amount of flack for. I often see individuals say that, oh, we just better character him. And now I understand that this stance can be made within certain bounds of logistics, but I don't really see how this works here. So let me go ahead and explain the intricacies of this sort of matchup that has a lot of parallels with Duck Hunt. So this character's boxing game is a little bit stronger in terms of frames. So we got frame 2 jab. The jab's also really safe, and if they space it, we cannot shield grab it, even though there's the frames for it. So that's something you always have to keep in the back of your head. Similar thing goes for down tilt. The threat bubbles of these characters are also fairly comparable. Their movement stats are pretty similar, and the range discrepancy is not really noticeable for the most part, at least from my experience. But the very important tool you have to be wary of is Pichu, and of course Poison Breath, but I'll get to that in a sec. Pichu is a very funny move that does more than 12 damage, and therefore you can't use Crown willy-nilly to just win neutral sometimes. As if we were to look at Plant's aerial, so like forward air doesn't exceed it, back air does, but it's also really slow and unsafe. Up air doesn't break it, down air doesn't, nair doesn't, but this tool is pretty fast. It breaks the armor, leads to combos, and puts us at the ledge, which is very unideal against this character. The high base knockback of the move, as well as it just lingering for so long, makes it difficult. Now, it is a projectile, yes, so on occasion we can try to, say, go for a reflect, or try to armor through it. Because of the high damage of this move, though, I would not recommend armoring through it that often. So there may be like some mix-up scenarios you could be going for in regards to that, but I wouldn't suggest using it that much. Another thing to be wary of in regards to neutral is Poison Breath. A good Piranha Plant player is going to use this move for both movement, as their air movement stats are higher than K-Rool, so he can weave around with this move. And the fact that it's chargeable, he can act out of it immediately, so that's something you always have to consider when engaging when he's charging it. And when it's tossed out, the weird scaling of damage on K-Rool's crown when he were to throw it allows Plant to break the armor when this move itself wouldn't actually do so. So he could toss it out, and it would be covering some space, so it would make us think a bit on the placement of when we use the move, and if we aren't careful, we get stuck, take a lot of damage, and we are stuck in lag while we effectively don't have armor during the toss, which is a huge gamble, a huge gamble. So therefore, it oftentimes devolves to both characters using their normals, and if they were to, say, press the B button, they just say, you can't use it. And their normals aren't actually that different from each other, especially comparing their movement stats. Piranha Plant, airspeed, 1.0 going down to where K-Rool is. 0.945, very similar. Dash speed, initial dash. Piranha Plant, 0.82, and K-Rool's is a little bit higher, right here. Very comparable. The big difference between the two, though, is more so the reward each can get per neutral engagement. So Plant can do, say, landing nair into jab, or landing nair into dash attack at some percent ranges. But the actual damage that Piranha Plant gets from those exchanges are less. Similar sort of combo route can be said for K-Rool, doing landing nair into dash grab, forward throw dash attack, or landing fair and dash attack. And once they get that sort of advantage state, both can really tear into each other. It's a matter of who gets lucky in neutral oftentimes, or who's able to play around the small margin for error that they may have in their own corresponding disadvantages. So I think that there is something to be said about a difference in the matchup, but I don't think in practice it's that meaningful for Plant to be put up here. But if you are insane with K-Rool and are able to play every matchup basically to like a T, I can see Piranha Plant possibly being here. Alright, Young Link. Young Link is in a similar boat to Duck Hunt. Young Link has the ability to possibly threaten timeouts and zone a bit with his own projectiles. And in the event that we try to, say, tank through them, he can hit the chip, and at applicable ranges, he can then either shield or disengage, which can be a bit cumbersome for a character that's not as nimble. However, there is a distinct difference between Young Link and Toon Link. Young Link has issues taking out stocks like Duck Hunt. So, if you are willing to play the patience game enough, I can see it theoretically being there in the +1 area, Young Link. The thing is, he's going to be running away a lot. And when you are hit by a projectile, especially if we were to look at his smashes, which aren't that slow, all things considered, but his forward smash and down smash can break the armor. Now, you were kind of wondering why I might be saying this. Well, it's because his bomb, this move, were to be tossed out, it forces K-Rool in a significant amount of hit lag, and if the Young Link reacts accordingly, he can jump over it or shield it and then just run up down smash. He has to also be willing to play that long game though, otherwise I think K. Rool is going to win. A big patience demand for both individuals here. Alright, what else is there? I guess I can talk about Inkling as well. This is a weird stance I've sort of gone back and forth with. I used to think this matchup was even. I went through a phase of thinking it could be winning, and now I'm conflicted. So here's my thoughts going into it, right? This character has some nice boxing options, but also has moves that function similar to a sword. Remember earlier on why K. Rool is perfectly fine against sword characters. The difference with this character, though, is that their damage output with combos and such is incredibly high, and once you get to those points, you're going to be inked up so much that they're going to be able to play for those engagements. So they're going to try and force a fast game on you. The typical sword characters don't really do that all that much. They just play neutral and then try and like maybe get you off like an edge guard or maybe a ledge trap. Inkling just keeps going on any engagement, which can be a bit stressful, but the caveat of this is if you are able to force the game to slow down by recognizing the pace that they're trying to set, it is doable to do. Well, I mean, all these matchups are doable, but I'm more so saying that it could be winning if you were to recognize what they want and then force them onto what you do. I'm not exactly 100% confident on the feasibility of such, which is why I always keep going back and forth on it, if that makes sense. Both characters can edgeguard each other fairly well. K. Rool's down air lingers for a really long time. The fact that the character doesn't have a hitbox and a recovery move makes consideration of going for ricochet cannibal stuff on like sometimes, but I would more so try and go for like that down air still. Their recovery is pretty fast. It's kind of like a Luigi situation. Although if you do get them to spend their jump, snag it somewhere, they're donezo. So I guess I can also note this. Similar to Young Link and Duck Hunt, the raw kill confirms that Inkling has, like up throw, up air, or like a tech chase scenario, you can avoid completely through proper DI in terms of the tech chase scenario, although it can sometimes be difficult to react to, though if you pay attention to your percent, you can note when they might be doing it. And for the up throw, up air, you can force yourself to take more damage or put yourself in scenarios where they are unable to grab you nearly as well. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. It more or less just evolves to getting a ton of damage and hoping that they get their edge guard rather than those confirms. Oh yeah, here's a funny thing to note here. Let me just pull up Inkling here. This move is what the thing I'm referring to in terms of like tech chases. They can force you into the corner decently well, and then once they get that tech chase in there, they can go for roller and then just cover tech options. But note the damage here, 11%. This is not enough to break the threshold for the crown armor. So, in given instances where, say, you would be put in those tech scenarios, you can default to DIing up, or sometimes down to throw off their timing. It has its use case. But in the event that you DI up, you can exit tumble and be in no landing lag of any form, in case you were to, say, try and go for an auto-cancelled aerial. You can just crown, tank it, and then just reversal the situation since they'd be stuck in lag. So it's just an interesting interaction that I think is noteworthy. So, Snake. Snake does a lot of the same things as K. Rool, at least in terms of like approaches to the game. It's very similar jab in terms of speed. It's slightly faster, though they get like some reward off of it and get like a tech chase, but if you DI up, it's not going to occur. Cool. Forward tilt are comparable speeds, but K. Rool's is larger, so they have a little bit different uses, but they're pretty comparable overall. Up tilt, similar speed, both dedicated kill moves. And then the differences start to come in regards to their specials, though. Their specials are the main difference. So Grenade is a frame 1 escape option, as well as just a frame 1 tool that is an item So it allows him to toss it out and then move independently from it for some tricky situations. However, the damage of this move is not enough to exceed the crown armor for Cranarang. This is important because you can toss it out, tank something, and since the animation for actually tossing the grenade is so long, as well as simply trying to prime it, it's like you would pick it, the pin, and then you shield. That whole shebang is actually a fairly lengthy duration, so 21 frames right here. And it's a pretty comparable speed to how fast the hitbox for Crown comes out. As a result, you can discourage the use of grenade here. So you can toss it out preemptively and he's trying to cook him. You can hit him or even just hit the grenade and force him to be even a larger frame disadvantage when shielding there, and then gain your stage that way. There's a bunch of other interactions as well that allow K. Rool to break through a lot of what Snake is going to be trying to set up. Say he's trying to land, right? Which is pretty typical when Snake's trying to recover. You can either try and directly engage onto him and say, I don't know, he's trying to maybe potentially reverse the situation or place some chip onto you. You can up air, it'll hit him, and even if it hits the grenade, K. Rool will armor it. So he's not going to be losing leverage when guessing correctly. Another thing I can also talk about is the weight discrepancy too. So even if he's trying to play for that chip, K. Rool can continue to play for those risks more. However, upon mistakes, it can be a bit difficult to come back from them. It's like a similar boat for both. When Snake is off the level, K. Rool can just throw out a projectile if he's sent far enough away. Otherwise, defaulting to going for down air at ledge is a very strong tool. And then if K. Rool's thrown off the level, Snake goes Nikita and then we don't recover. That's a bit of an issue. There's also the aspect of chip being built up to allow those farther exchanges to seal out K. Rool's stocks when guessing correctly for the Snake. So I am a bit conflicted as to where to really put him as a result. I can see a case for both. Alright, I've gotten a lot of flack for this one recently, and I understand. It's hard for me to believe as well. Allow me to speak before you make your judgments, okay? So, long range is buns. I agree. Getting in can be very difficult. However, note we're playing a character that has some of the strongest zone-breaking tools in the game. He has armor on practically half of his moveset, and he has a move that's a projectile that has armor on it. There's some interesting interactions in regards to playing long range against Min Min, and I'm going to note them here. The slower jab, and just in general, the character is not as adept at boxing. Similar speed and dash attack, but K. Rool has armor. So, things get a bit interesting when we talk about the tilts versions. Note how this does not exceed the damage threshold, nor does the powered up version, nor does Ram Ram. And Megawatt can if it's fresh only, but if it's not, K. Rool can tank through it. Now, things get a bit more complicated though, as Min Min can throw arms independently of each other, right? You can hit him with one, and then try and swing with the other. Now, I understand that this can leave K. Rool in positions where he's going to have the armor on Crown be beaten out anyway. However, this can force Min Min to think more about the punches that they swing, which is what you need in order to get in. Any sort of means you can force your opponent to think more about their objectives will allow you to get those desired engagements more. The reason why I'm stating this is because there's going to be cases where you're going to want to jump, right? In order to get around the arms, yes? Well, there's going to be cases where they're going to try and call out that jump, and instead, you stay grounded and toss out the crown. And in that case, they're in a pretty tough spot, right? So it becomes a bit of a 50-50 there on if you're going to jump over the arms to gain leverage into mid-range, which is a much better situation, or you're going to stay grounded and they call it the jump, you throw out the crown, and they're forced into shield, or it hits them. Gives you that leverage, bam. You're going. You're going in this matchup now. Now, when you actually get to that mid-range, it becomes the typical RPS, so rock, paper, scissors, where they're gonna either swing, and you can dash attack or forward tilt, pretty great options there, or they're gonna possibly try and go for a burst option of their own. You can shield, forward tilt works fine there as well, up tilt, jab to just snuff them out, or they may try to do something defensively like a roll or a jump, and then of which case you either play to cover that typical landing and just react to the jump, cover them coming down. Their tools for landing are not that great, and then I go for like a dash attack to cover like the spot dodge and rolls, and just wait for the jump. They shield, funny grab, go burr. That's neutral, roughly, and I cover like juggling there a bit. Another thing that's really funny here is, again, Ricochet Cannonball being very, very good here. So in the event that you gain that leverage in neutral, right? Which isn't too hard. It can be difficult for long range because it's a 50-50, and if you're put in the corner and that's big scary. Once you are smooth sailing, you get into mid-range and you're playing at your fun space where Min Min is like, oh no, if I mess up I die. That is when you can throw them off, right? Get your funny throw game or your funny dash attack, forward air, what have you. And if you rack on like 50 or so damage, you can start to throw out Crown to armor through their arms again. Note how I said that K. Rool does have the means to tank through them. You can throw them out in cases you may think they're going to swing, and if not, you can just go for the Ricochet. There you have a tether recovery, so they're forced to go to the ledge with it, and then they get stuck, and then you hit them with funny back air, and they go bye-bye. So that's funny. And even in cases where you don't feel confident to go for the crown, you can just try and go for the Ricochet anyway, tech it, and then nair them when they're coming back. Sure, Min Min may be able to do that funny down angle forward smash, but if you know what you're doing, you can persevere enough to level the playing field. I think that pretty much just spells well enough why I think the matchup is even effectively. Although you can argue that K. Rool has some leverages in, say, like juggle scenarios, but overall I think it is in practice even. See my matchup write-up in my Discord for more details if you want to see more about that. Lucario. This is a funny matchup. This character likes to get hit, but not too much. K. Rool has lots of big hitting moves, and therefore can seal out stocks early enough where Lucario can be put at a significant back foot. If you were to say trying to play for that though in practice, you would soon realize that Lucario has amazing movement stats, like airspeed. Where is Lucario? Near the top. Air acceleration? That's also pretty high up here. I forget where he is. Yep, pretty high up here as well. So matching him in the air can be a bit difficult since K. Rool's jump arcs are fairly predictable through his limited range of moving around there. So you pretty much have to auto-ban triplats. Otherwise they're going to hit you a few times and circle camp you. And that is never fun, right? Circle camping bad. But we're talking about capacity here, and not necessarily how good or bad a particular approach to the game is at like a personal level. And we'll get to Sonic soon, don't worry. Now, those few hits that we're going to be landing as a result of such can give Lucario the edge to take advantage of the desire to not be hit much. Ergo, it can be very, very scary once you're in that position. They can kill K. Rool at like 50! That is crazy! Just like half their moveset does it at that point. Aura Sphere is an incredible ledge trapping tool. They throw us off the level once and they just start charging that sucker. Chargeable projectiles in this game are really good overall, but more so, it does depend a bit on the context of the character's kit. But on Lucario's kit, they have more than the means to actually accomplish that full charge, especially against K. Rool, and they're able to get that high aura if they are willing to play the long game. Now, things get a bit more complicated once we start to look at stages other than those triplats. So wide stages, Lucario does still have an ample means of movement, right? And maybe integrations of mix-ups for like extreme speed on stage. However, if K-Rool guesses right at those ranges on those stages, it is far more likely for K-Rool to actually seal out stocks there. The horizontal presence is substantially stronger for K-Rool with respect to his vertical. If you are willing to play that long game for both, it's a slow one that whoever gets leverage can possibly lead it to a steamroll of some form. Sonic. One may think that timeouts fighting against this character are going to be significantly more difficult to play around, yes? However, I would argue it's not nearly as bad as some other characters that can camp vertically. See Zero Suit for details, we'll get to her. Remember how I noted for Lucario that K-Rool's horizontal presence is significantly stronger than his vertical? This is the key part here. Sonic's horizontal speed is very high, but if we were to look at airspeed physics, airspeed is not as high as Lucario, which is up here, so it's high, right? But if we were to look at acceleration, it's really low. So the jumps that Sonic does have massive commitment. Kind of a similar situation to K-Rool. That's the value of having high air acceleration does. You're able to manipulate where you are without needing to spend your jump. K-Rool is more than able to take advantage of this. K-Rool can throw out a projectile to cover a big span of the stage, or simply sit under him and react to what he does a decent amount of the time. Now, not all situations you can react to, but that limited air acceleration allows more reactions to be used than the characters with higher air acceleration. Roy is a similar boat as well, where he has high airspeed, but the air acceleration is very poor. So with this in mind, it potentially leaves K-Rool at a sort of advantage here, since Sonic's primary focus for like a bottom line for his wins, playing for timeouts, can be dampened significantly against K-Rool. You do want to avoid triplats though, just because yes, this character doesn't have great air acceleration, but their horizontal is high enough where if they were to spend their jump or like jump on a platform and then go for like some spin dash shenanigans, it can be difficult sometimes. So it could just be a me thing though. But if you were to say go to PS2 or like Small Battlefield, I would argue that it is fine to go to those stages. Oh yeah, I guess I can also say that K-Rool has the means to push advantage once he gets those guesses in as well. I mean, Sonic can too, if he's willing to do it. Say, throws K-Rool off the level and has the spring timing down enough where K-Rool's always sent out. If you know what you're doing, you can force guesses in those exchanges rather than always being sent out and then possibly taking a ton of damage or just losing a stock from it. Yeah, also, K-Rool Blunderbuss quote-unquote armors homing attack, so you're welcome for that. It's because the move's like a hit grab, and the fact that it's a hit grab makes it act strangely against grabs. It'll technically hit K-Rool, but it won't send him into hit stun or anything like that. It just leaves him sitting there and then Sonic is grabbed, so K-Rool is weird. Voiceover Smithers here to add a bit of dialogue to the topic of Sonic counterplay. It's fairly understood that Sonic has really good ball moves, yes. Well, there just so happens to be a dependency and a sacrifice that Sonic needs to forego in order to make the most use of his specials, which no one seems to be talking about. Positioning. Reason being that they are slow to charge and come out plainly, making reacting to them raw possible, as well as area denial strategies, forcing Sonic to have to think about trying to go for them at all. For K-Rool specifically, he can chuck out one of his projectiles at Sonic, and it'll go right through his special ball moves, which exemplifies their use as area denial tools, to then hit him and has armor to say no to most buttons in the game. Talk about zone breaking. There's also the fact that the ball moves predominantly move horizontally, which is where K-Rool is going to reside the vast majority of the time anyway. Just some things to think about. Let's talk about Marth. Sword character, right? Pretty good situation to be in. We have better boxing tools and comparable mid-range options. Alright, awesome. Now, if we were to go ahead and pull up Marth here, we would start to see the damage values being valuable. Jab is whatever, forward tilt, space can break it. The crown armor anyway. Dash attack space can do it, but you're not going to see it that often. Of course, you got your smashes that can. Neutral air is able to do it. Forward air can do it fresh. Back air can do it fresh. Up air can do it fresh. Down air can do it fresh. There's a bunch of moves here that have the capacity to break it, including the shield breaker move here. And even in cases where, say, the move doesn't break the armor, the added hit lag for the landing a tipper can allow for certain reactions to work. Kind of like with the projectiles, although to a lesser extent since Marth is also being put into hit lag, where you get the reaction into a grab sometimes, or just being thrown off the level. That can happen. Maybe a juggle situation. But the key part here that differentiates the other sword characters here is that he not only does he have more means to break the crown armor, but he also has more means to seal out stocks. Kind of a situation with Roy where you have a bunch of moves with high knockback, except Marth can take advantage of the disjoint advantage he has. The better air physics, I believe, like his air drift is better. So in positions where he's going to be sitting at a far enough distance to potentially outrange K-Rool, he can sit around there and bait a jump in, fade back, and then whiff punish. That is not something Roy is able to accomplish nearly as well. And even if he does get that there, he's going to be hitting the weak hit of his forward air or nair or whatever, which is going to be not much, right? But when Marth does it, he's got that tipper. Now we have this potential for breaking the armor, and we have means to explore it more through the air speed that the character has, air acceleration I should say, and we have a plethora of options to take out stocks. Uh-oh. Well then why isn't it nearly as bad as, say, I don't know, Sephiroth, another sword character? Why is he not as bad to deal with? Well, it's because this character has such a gimpable recovery. Now, Marth may have a larger means to stall a bit as a result of his floatiness, but there's going to be times where, to a disproportionate degree across the cast, where you can throw him off, and then just nair and he's done. Where K-Rool doesn't need to fight much for those exchanges, while Marth needs to play neutral a lot more. I am not confident enough to say personally that it is a winning matchup. If you think it is, sure, that's fine. But, I don't know, it could just be a me thing, where I am in confliction here. Okay, Diddy Kong. This character doesn't have comparable range, right? They have pretty stubby options. Their air physics are pretty poor, right? In fact, K-Rool has like a higher airspeed here. Uh-oh, that can be an issue. So those jump arcs can be fairly predictable, although we do have run speed though, so the character's overall grounded threat bubble is comparable to K-Rool's. So we have that sort of aspect to consider here. We have that range difference compensated for through that, and we have an item here. Very, very tricky situation. Items in this game are really, really good. Allows you to move independently of a hitbox, kind of like what a projectile does, but you're able to do it frame 1 if you're in the air, which is incredible. Now, typically, you're going to see this mentioned for other characters down here that also have items. You'd be able to explore simply putting yourself into shield in multiple situations to avoid being hit by the item and therefore dampen the effectiveness of the tool itself. However, Diddy Kong has a command grab, which then forces an RPS in a situation that not many other characters are able to do. So then, how would you be playing neutral? It's very awkward, because the grab is going to go through shield, and it can also go through crown, with it also being faster than crown. What are we to do? Just have Diddy here. Yep, frame 3 jab. I know overall, like, pretty similar boxing options, though. Let's go with the monkey flip. You see that hitbox? You see how it's so small, though? And you see how it's not disjointed? What if we were to instead utilize other tools here to snuff out Diddy, rather than typical crown to just tank through stuff and force people to respect K. Rool? The option I'm referring to is King K. Rool's Nair. This move is able to, at worst, trade with Monkey Flip, making the grounded threat bubble of the character not as much of a difference as one may think. You don't need to be as concerned about these grounded engagements if you are willing to utilize King K. Rool's Nair more, which you kind of should be using a lot anyway, so using a little bit more shouldn't be that much of an ask. There's also the fact that the startup of the command grab is frame 18, so unless they're doing it point blank, you can react to this offline, and at applicable ranges at burst range, you can sit in shield, and then whatever option they do, whether they toss the banana, this also applies to it, by the way, or they go for monkey flip, you nair right through it, and then just force them to respect you. Incredible attributes to have. But just to reiterate what I said, King K. Rool's Nair is able to both deal with Diddy's monkey flip and banana at the same time, with it being able to armor the banana and at worst trade with monkey flip. And if that happens, it's actually beneficial. You get more frame advantage and you can do some funny stuff with it. Oh yeah, if Diddy uses banana for ledge traps, you can use crown to just go right through it, which is funny. Even if it's on the ground, K. Rool will make it disappear and then he's still in the animation. Pretty funny. It can be a bit tricky sometimes to recover, but if you are well acquainted with how to vary your angle of approach, it shouldn't be that much of an issue. Diddy's air physics, like I said, are not strong enough to be as threatening as, say, Marth, if you were to, say, go for like an edge guard. Alright. Sora. This character is funky. We have a situation where we're facing a sword, so you may think, okay, advantage, right? Because K. Rool armor go burr against swords. But something else to note here is the fact that this character has very comparable movement stats to K. Rool while having that sword. Ergo, playing neutral can be a bit hit or miss. Like, okay, that doesn't sound too bad, but also note that this character's damage output is incredible. If they know how to do near loops or noops, you're going to be taking 80 from that one exchange to offset K. Rool's sustain, which is, that can spell some issue. Let's go ahead and pull up Sora here. Also, yeah, this character's boxing capacity is a bit weaker than K. Rool's, so we can sometimes get that going. Like, okay, this move does like 3 damage, 6 damage, okay, we can just armor it. But you also have to remember that they have back air, so if they call that out, they can use that move. Up air also works, and the move hits pretty low. If they were to, say, go for a footstool, double jump, up air, that also works. Or just landing up air, that's fine. But also, if they were to simply, be jumping, they can react to the startup of the move, clank with it with their nair, and then just come down on K. Rool. Or if K. Rool tries to use it on the ground, Sora can either deflect it, and it would be coming back at you, and like, that's not mine anymore, and it has a hitbox now. Coming to me, and he can combo off of it. Oh boy. And of course they can simply jump over it, because that's what they're going to be doing a bunch, since nair loops are really, really good. So you're going to see a lot of mid-range exchanges more so devolve to scrapping with forward tilt, dash attack, forward air, nair, your typical mid-range engagement stuff. Now, Note how I said earlier that the risk-reward, though, is disproportionately in Sora's favor, which can be a bit troublesome in some situations. If you were to put yourself at the ledge, sometimes you can mitigate the damage output you're going to be receiving, so that's nice. It may seem kind of bad here, right? Because this character's mid-range is better, or not, the risk-reward against K-Rool in a situation where he's typically benefiting from being there is not the best for him, okay? But what's to say that you can't play for a whiff punish? If you play for a whiff punish, or simply guess right, you can put Sora in a really bad spot. His recovery is not good. I don't care how many people say this on the internet, Sora's recovery is not that good. He's really slow in the air. It's like trying to make an argument for Kirby's recovery being good, even though it's already been established that it's good. I don't understand. Anyway, sure, he can go really, really far, but so can Villager, but everybody says that Villager's recovery is exploitable, so what's the difference here? Well, the thing with Sora is that he has hitboxes during it, so okay, sure, he can cover himself a little bit better. But then you remember you're playing against a character that has a move that can bludgeon through 90% of the moves in the game. And it's a similar sort of spin move, his up special, to like the Link's, where K-Rool can just go for funny down air, and it kind of just works. Doesn't really cover above him. So there's also the fact that when he uses his side special, yes, it has better hitbox coverage for some situations, but it doesn't auto-snap. So if you are able to time your down air, which isn't too hard since the move's kind of slow, it's frame 17, that's pretty slow. You can put him down there, and then he's forced to come up pretty slowly, as his double jump is pretty slow while being a floaty character, and then just double dunk him, which is pretty funny. And yes, that floatiness can also help him as well push those edge guards too, but I would argue that K-Rool's is a little bit better of a recovery, simply because Sora is not able to contest K-Rool's buttons if he were to use them, when in comparison, if Sora does it, K-Rool can just say, "Ne'er go burr." So I can see a stance for theoretically being even, as a result of both characters being kind of similarly strong in a lot of areas, and the touch of death nature that Sora has, being able to potentially offset the weight discrepancy. But K-Rool doesn't need much exchanges himself to push advantages either, so, Alright. Ness. Now, I'm probably going to get a decent amount of slack for this too in the comments section. Ness is a funky one, where we have a situation that is similar to like other touch of death characters, that their neutral is not that great, but when they guess correctly, they can do a lot of damage. About that lot of damage thing though, at best, it oftentimes just offsets the weight discrepancy that they have, so I don't value it that much in this case. Because of that, if K-Rool wins the exchange here, K-Rool can put Ness in a really bad spot. So, you win neutral, not that unlikely, we have better burst potential. He does have a bit stronger boxing capacity, especially with his down tilt, being able to rack on a lot of damage if you let him. Although, if you were to look at a lot of his moves, 10 damage, 9 damage, 4 damage, 5 damage, 2 damage, we have 11, forward air not doing it, back air doing it if it's fresh enough. It has like a few uses though, so it's something to think about. Up air doesn't exceed. Down air, it does exceed, but it's also a bit staleness dependent, though it's not going to be used much, so you may see it more often. Though it's also kind of hard for him to get in. Crown Rank can actually tank through PK Fire, which is funny. And there's another thing to note here about how Ness is going to be approaching the game in general. You're going to see him jumping a lot and mashing those aerials, yeah? What if I told you K-Rool can use an option, or a couple options, just say, you can't jump nearly as much anymore, and now he has to play the ground game, where he has a significant range discrepancy. So we have Blunderbuss and Crown. Crown being able to tank through the majority of his aerials, and Blunderbuss being able to go through his forward air and utilizing, say, Blunder Bouncing can allow you to, even in cases where they were to call out you going for it, they're going to be stuck in hit lag, you'll disengage, and then you'll be able to parry the second landing aerial, which is just insane. It's an aspect that I would recommend trying to explore against other characters that can do 2 aerials in a short hop or even full hop. It gives K. Rool a frame advantage where he can utilize vacuum delay in combination to also just snag people. It's a crazy thing. It makes getting in on him very difficult. Not for everyone, but definitely a significant portion of the cast can be affected by this. Even characters that can't do the 2 aerials in a full hop or short hop kind of ordeal. Another thing to note is that King K. Rool's forward air is able to trade with Ness's forward air. So say they are jumping a bunch and maybe they weave in between your projectiles. You can just forward air them, and it's going to trade, and we're going to win the trade war. And again, weight discrepancy shenanigans makes it even more valuable to do. Using PK Thunder for juggles, we can nair through it or reflect it, so that's funny. Edge guards for Thunder. This is more of a general thing though. I guess I can mention it here. If you were to default to DIing out, the knockback of the PK Thunder is a bit random. Sometimes it sends you in, sometimes it sends you out. So in the event that it sends you in, you're going to be likely under the stage a bit, and then you just take the stage, right? And even if you're sent over it, you're going to be farther back, so they need to commit to the potential of following up onto it, which gives like some other situations for K. Rool. But if it sends you out, you just DI out and they have no follow-up potential. Let's see, Isabelle. Now, in this matchup, we have Crown, right? It can tank through a lot of the stuff Isabelle's going to be doing. They have a stronger boxing game because their jab is kind of dumb in terms of like their nair, their forward air, and back air, up air, down air. We go through all of them with Crown. However, with all of those nice things to have there, they have Pocket. So it makes us think about using Crown in a different way than what some other characters would be doing. Because if we guess wrong, we lose the tool. Now, there may be some times where we toss it out and the opponent hits us so far that we don't pick it back up, but there's also the chance of us being hit at certain angles or in certain positions where the Crown just falls off the level, or we just catch it back. Against Isabelle, though, that isn't there. So they can just take it, and now we lose a part of our neutral, that can be concerning. However, we still have Nair, which allows us to tank through stuff just fine. There are some jump arc timings that can allow Isabelle to, say, do a forward air or back air to hit her head, but it's pretty precise to do, albeit a bit easier for Isabelle to do in comparison to other characters since she's floaty. But another thing to note here is that, yes, this character may be able to then rack up a decent amount of damage, but taking that stock can be pretty difficult. So another character, kind of like Duck Hunt, can discourage the use of Crown, so forcing us to be a bit more clever about our approaches. Isabelle can do that, and still not have that great of means of taking out stocks. Like, from what I have experienced, it more so befalls them either pocketing a cannonball. Don't let them do that, by the way, because it makes the weakness of this character less of an impact. Like, sure, you could use Crown a little bit more, but then they can just throw a blunderbuss and you take 60 from it, so that is not fun. However, if you were to, say, not do that, then this character is going to struggle a good bit on taking out stocks. Their best means is to try and set up a ledge trap scenario and maybe extend off of the Lloyd, though they need to commit to it. They need to commit to going for it since they're so slow to move up. You may think like, oh, if they were to try and cover other ledge options, say they put it at roll distance and they start like sitting in shield and nairing at the ledge. Like, okay, it doesn't sound all that bad, but at least from my experience, I could be wrong here, which is why I am a bit reluctant to put the character here. I haven't seen somebody do that, but also be able to follow up and seal out stocks that way at the same time. Another alleyway for Isabelle to potentially take stocks is up smash out of shield. It is a pretty fast option and can help in some juggle situations. However, this is typically one of Isabelle's better options to be using out of shield, as it yields combos and it's pretty fast. It's technically faster to use Nair out of shield, but at low percent, the most she's going to get is mix-ups. It's minus on hit. At the beginning, you're going to see a lot of up smashes more so used in terms of scrapping situations, but after a while, those moves may be unscaled enough if the pacing of the game isn't pushed to be a bit faster, which is kind of what K. Rool can do with the options that he has to tank through stuff, as well as just having a lot of moves that are able to take such a light character out very quickly. Also, why do I have you here? Yeah, why do I have you here? I don't think you're this bad. I think you're here. Shulk, I think, is a similar situation to Marth in regards to, say, oh, it's a sword character, and we do well against swords. They do have a lot of range, but this range doesn't really help in this specific instance, unlike Sephiroth, considering the damage values that Shulk does. Jab frame 5, we can outbox him. Woohoo. Yeah, this move, 8 damage, 8. Back air does enough, but only on the sweet spot, and is full hop and stillness dependent. Up air doesn't do it. Down air can sometimes, I guess, but you very rarely are going to see it happen. Now, the tricky thing about this, though, is that he does technically have the means to do it with his aerials, but it is bound by a resource, being his Monado arts. Now, resource characters in general, I think K. Rool does just fine against, since he can force the expenditure of them fairly well. Shulk is no different. When Shulk utilizes his resource, he's going to be changing how he approaches the game. So you may have a similar situation to, say, Pokemon Trainer, where you have to think a bit more per given Pokemon you may see, but if you grind it out, it becomes less of a detriment. With these Monado arts, you have the Buster, which gives that damage output that's desirable, and the Smash art that can help displace the weight difference, as well as the gimpableness that Shulk has, if not that, but also the jump Monado. And then we also have speed. Speed is essentially an option he's going to be used to try and chain you off the level a lot of the times. It's going to be like nair, 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 and just you get off the level. Like, okay, whatever, that's fine. The thing is, though, we have a similar situation to like Ness and Lucas, where their aerial game is significantly better than their ground game. Ergo, we can utilize Crown and Blunderbuss to cut off airspace to force them to play on the ground more. Now, it becomes less of an impact when they start utilizing Speed Monado, but this becomes a resource so they can't rely on it all that much. I'm saying this because when Shulk has Speed Monado on, his jump arcs and like height that he travels are shorter, and short enough where he can go underneath K. Rool's projectiles, say if you were to like full hop them, for example. Once he has that spent, he doesn't have that to use as much. So then he has to rely on Buster, with himself not having that great of a means to maneuver around K. Rool's projectiles in the first place, to access the damage, as well as just like the speed of the moves being kind of slow. So getting to the point where he can take advantage of the damage output to exceed the damage threshold for Crown is not that often of an occurrence. One may think that using the Smash Art can help displace the weight discrepancy, but I would argue that it doesn't nearly as much, considering the fact that Shulk's means to confirm into moves requires him to switch Monados, so like shield into Smash, or like jump into Smash, or speed into Smash. And at that point, he'd be spending 2 of his Monado arts, I should say. With that being stated here, we're actually spending the use of those resources a bunch, making the next stock easier to deal with. leaving them with less decisions to explore, and allowing us to play the game at a faster pace, further disallowing them to use them. Shulk's recovery is also fairly gimpable. It does travel far, does have a big hitbox. Just look at this air slash hitbox. It's frame 10. It's also pretty big until you realize K. Rool has Nair to just say, I don't care. So I think it's fine. I think it might be slightly winning, but I can understand a case for even because I haven't practiced this matchup that much. So in terms of showing to me that it is, instead of just in theory, I'm not entirely convinced in that regard. Okay, Lucas. Now, I feel confident enough to put this character in even. Now, the reason for this is the fact that this character has a lot of means to take out stocks that are also capable to exceed the threshold for crown armor. Got faster jab, so boxing with this character can be unideal. We have forward air. It does 12.5 damage, which, well, the sweet spot lingers for a while too. It's really safe in addition to that. Back air breaks it, up air breaks it fresh, down air can break it, and Zair is fast enough where they can tap it and then just shield, so it can discourage the use of crown a good deal if they are in position to box. It can be a bit tricky to utilize the move well. However, if they were to try and play long range exchanges more, maybe play for chip, and use more PK fires, that is where crown starts to shine through in its utility. You can, of course, try reflecting, and since they're going to be farther back, it's not going to be as difficult to react to. However, if you do that, you're going to be at risk of them absorbing that back, and now they're going to be healing themselves. So I would more so play into crown just to gain that positional. A similar sort of issue can also be said in regards to Ness and Lucas, where you can force more grounded options from the opponent, and it is significantly more valuable in this matchup since the grounded options that both Lucas and Ness have are significantly worse than their aerials. Kind of another situation like Little Mac when you can force jumps, which are very unideal for this character. Though, when this does occur, Lucas has Zair. This move is insane. They can double jump cancel into Zair, so they can potentially just barely move up on the ground, and we try to like react to like jump arcs that you may be able to do against like other floaty characters. We have to think here now. We actually have to think more. So they can like jump up, Zair, and they go down. And now our projectile just completely misses them and we're in lag. So that can be a bit of an issue. So generally, neither one wants to utilize projectiles all that much. Sometimes Lucas will use PK fire a bit, although they have to give up a decent amount of positioning due to the pushback that it gives. And doing that against a character that has great turtling capacity is unideal. So then it more so devolves to who guesses right first in neutral to then get those advantage states, like a ledge trap or an edge guard. The thing about trying to edge guard Lucas is again this Zair. Ness doesn't have this, which makes me think that the matchup is nowhere near as bad. And there's also the scope of, for Ness anyway, to try and have the PK Thunder 2 hit us, to then make Ness not travel as far and not make it back to the stage. And since we're so big, we can tech the stage for a significantly wider window than most of the cast. So it gives it even more weight. But for Lucas, if they were to do that, since it's multi-hit, he just goes right through, it travels farther, and it doesn't get slowed down at all if they were to, say, hit K. Rool when trying to recover. And you don't even have the alleyway of potentially hitting PK Thunder. As a result of it being transcendent, makes edgeguarding this character way more difficult to do in practice. Now, if we were to try and say the same thing for K. Rool, if Lucas were to try and edgeguard, you may see a lot of PK Thunder too. Or not in PK Thunder 2. I think it's just PK Thunder. Yeah. It's multi-hit, right? So we can't clink with it. And if we try to armor through it, it's just gonna stick there a bit, and then we're gonna get stuck in it. However, because it's multi-hit, and the fact that it does a decent amount of hit lag when you're hit by it, you can SDI behind it and come back before he's able to toss out another one. So yes, we'd be getting damage, but we have the weight to be able to afford that. So it gets into like a weird spot where again it's a bunch of back and forth motion, and Lucas having many means to take stocks and rack on damage to offset the weights, so more so levels the playing field a bit. Playing for neutral is pretty back and forth. K-Rool has hard-hitting moves to knock away the light boy. I really think as a result of all these things, it can go either way. It's just a matter of knowing how the different tools interact to then act accordingly when they come about. And also, PK Freeze is a joke. We can air dodge it on reaction most of the time, or even just like reflect it, up air it, which is funny. It also doesn't go that large of a horizontal space. They really shouldn't be using that tool that much. If you see him using it, you should be getting back to stage almost every single time. Just abuse the ignorance, please. Essentially, what I failed to address here was that Lucas has the competence to dish out high damaging combos like Ness, while also having a better neutral and better disadvantage. The same core strategies still apply as I explain here though, so it's not all that bad at the end of the day. Just wanted to make sure this connection was made by the listener here. Lucina. This character has a lot of similar attributes to Marth, right? So then why is this character this big of a degree of difference? Well, I actually am not sure about it personally, but I am more confident in myself saying that Lucina is even. Well, why is this? Well, if you were to look back on the Marth sort of spiel I gave, you have a lot of moves that deal more damage and are able to take stocks earlier. But you also have to note that we're playing a game that doesn't have a lot of microspacing options. However, there has been an innovation that not a lot of people are utilizing: Slingshot. This same thing goes for Lucas as well, although his utility of such can be stunted a bit with K-Rool's projectiles a bit, because when he's in the air, he can't really deal with them all that well. Lucina can, however, deal with them a bit better. You can react to him, just clank with them, maintain that positioning just fine, or even push advantage in some timings. Now, there's also the scope of more consistently ending off stocks too, as a result of not having a need to learn or even have that sort of thing in play in order to take out those stocks. So you could do landing near one F smash, get your edge guards, which this character is more than capable of doing. And it can be a pretty sticky situation for K-Rool sometimes. However, similar to Marth, we have a lot of leverage going for us because sword character against K-Rool is oftentimes very good. Look back at what I said about Marth a lot and compare it to Lucina and not having a need to have the microspacing tool, and the ambiguousness of the microspacing makes me sort of conflicted here on how feasible it is to consistently utilize it. Alright, Alph, or Olimar, whatever you want to put here. I put Alph because I don't think I really see anyone else doing it. Alph is in an interesting spot where he can afford to do a bunch of chip damage while also having decent means to actually take out stocks. However, upon him putting K-Rool in a situation where Pigman is on him, K-Rool can utilize Gut Check, where he can just all of a sudden have a very fast attack that's pretty strong to just throw out willy-nilly when a Pikmin is latched onto him. K-Rool also has range advantage, and this character functions pretty similar to a sword character, and typical sword shenanigans, K-Rool can kind of just do fine. But for Alph, we have that damage output, of course, we have sword characteristics, we do just fine. We have a sort of similar situation to say, maybe Young Link here. Although, taking out stocks with this character is not as dependent on situations to land like confirms and whatnot, or maybe K-Rool overextending for some reason. Olimar's smash attacks are incredible. Forward smash, minus 13, that's point blank, not even like spaced a little bit. If he uses that, it can take out stocks, but it's also really safe. So actually getting in onto him can be a bit more of a consideration going into it than, say, against Young Link, for example, because if they were to, say, throw out their move, Crown's oftentimes going to be able to tank through it. But since it's a smash attack, we're not going to often be able to do that. There's some instances, maybe white Pikmin, but you have to be amazing with noting on what Pikmin they're going to be utilizing at that given moment in order to really make the fullest of this situation. And even still, in the event that you guess correctly and you were to try and go for a crown to go right through, you're going to be at a frame disadvantage. Because this move has like such slow duration, it's 39 frames. It's so fast. It's such a fast option. So it can be a bit tricky sometimes to close in, so then you may think like, oh, I should be using dash attack more. But it's dash attack. It has massive commitment. Like, yes, we can get in through it, but the commitment on the option is pretty significant, and if we guess wrong, well, he's going to be hitting with this move, up smash, and then we take a ton of damage. Now, this all sounds pretty bad for K-Rool, right? I'm talking about, oh my gosh, there's this character that does a ton of damage and is able to take out stocks really early. Except for the fact that if we guess right once, we put him at the corner, we can just nair, and then he can't get off the ledge. I know this sounds pretty declarative in a listing that I've been very much saying like, hey, no match in this game is just an automatic win, and this is more of like a proportion thing, but Olimar is disproportionately vulnerable to getting off the ledge. His ledge roll is horrible. It's kind of similar situation to Isabelle as well, where they have this issue of getting off the ledge. Villager doesn't have this issue. His ledge roll is better, but we can kind of just mash nair, and he can't get off the ledge. And even if he tries to go for like a rising aerial or whatever, he's very minus. Or tries to toss Pikmin, we're going to be sitting in shield. Or even if he throws it out, we're going to armor it with our nair and just not care. And after that, he's going to be spending his jump. And now he's in a spot where he has to use his very committal recovery move, similar situation to Isabelle. So it's about playing that waiting game, but it's very stressful to do so. Like much more than trying to do it against the other characters up here. Which is why I put him here. So I butchered why Olimar is as bad as he is in the corner. He still is bad here though. To put it simply, Olimar is ill-equipped to deal with one simply shielding at ledge, as his floatiness makes covering his landings after going for the unreactable jump from ledge, even in the case where he whistle armors K-Rool's moves, easy to accommodate for with all other options being covered on reaction, as his double jump aerials are fairly minus when rising. There's also the fact that Olimar's side special does little to affect shields, and K-Rool as a whole for that matter, unless he has purples, since they can be plus on shield. However, K-Rool needs to sacrifice positioning against a character with the best turtling capacity in the game, so this will not happen all that often in terms of acquiring those purples. Not to mention that holding Pikmin makes his recoveries slower, and purples are the heaviest of all of them, thus pushing the weakness elsewhere, making a knowledge check the only hurdle involved. Did I mention I made a write-up over this matchup? Toon Link. I think this is the hardest Link to fight, for K-Rool anyway. This character has the means to play for chip better than Toon Link can. I mean, Young Link. I'm mixing them up, I guess. The reason why Toon Link can do it better is because Toon Link has better movement stats than even Young Link. People talk about how Young Link is so fast, but Toon Link is faster. Go to dash speed. We have... the move is 0.94, and then if I go find Young Link, we have a value that is very comparable, but if we were to look at run speed, go to Young Link, run speed is 0.7, and then we go to Toon Link, 0.9. So running away and playing for that chip is stronger for this character. Like, there is 0.2 of a difference for the movement stats. Like, at that point, I call it more significant. They also have very similar ranges. Having that movement leverage, and actually Toon Link has a little bit more range on his moves. You have that advantage in the presence that you have, and the fact that you're able to play for that chip more, which is, that can spell some issues. We might have a situation like Lucario, where they can run away and then just wait for like opportunistic moments to seal out the stocks here. And this is actually worse to deal with, as we have a situation where this character is fast, but also has more means to actually take out stocks. They have forward tilt, which kills earlier. They have up special, that's a kill move. They're Nair and forward air are kill moves, and they can confirm into it off of their projectiles, or even just go for a raw, and that's not even like a bad option to use. Things get a little bit more murky though when you realize that as soon as Toon Link tries to engage onto K. Rool, the jab is slower, so you don't really want to box. A lot of your moves are slower. What about your aerials? Nair doesn't break it. Forward air can if it's fresh, back air cannot. Up air can if it's the strong hit specifically, but good luck doing that landing. Down air does, but you're not going to be utilizing it like that since it's massive commitment. What I'm alluding to is that engaging to get to those exchanges are actually not as desirable as one may think. So you're going to be seeing a lot of individuals more so devolve to playing for that chip and just running away from K, trying to win through like a percent lead. And yes, this is a matchup that I think is more prone to going for timeout than against Sonic. You need to auto-ban Triplats. Yes, similar spiel to other potential timeout characters, because they can circle camp, but even then, they're floaty and are able to throw out multiple bombs down when you're trying to juggle them, to then just make it so you can't really chase them that well because of that floaty attribute. Sure, you can try and opt to cover their landings more. However, the air acceleration is higher than K. Rool's, and the airspeed is also higher. So they can start to weave around K. Rool's threat bubble to play for whiff punishes and get stocks off of it, while K. Rool has to do that to gain damage. And that can be game-changing right there. If you make wrong callouts on landings, you can just lose the game thereafter. This matchup heavily relies off of how the first stock goes. Whoever takes the first stock is going to win the game. You're not going to see all that much engagements from either because of this risk. So when you get that leverage, then they have to approach, and you can take that into snowball that into your advantage, and then just win. All right, Samus's, Sami, whatever label you want to put to them. The big thing that puts this character above a lot of the other zoner-esque characters in this game is because of how amazing Charge Shot is. I'd say it's the best chargeable projectile, especially in the context of Samus's kit. So we have a similar situation to say against Mewtwo, where they can sometimes combo off of it, right? Okay, that's a nice attribute to have. But Samus is able to afford risking going for it more because the character is heavier. This character's recovery is also pretty good, so even in cases where they're sent off, it can be a bit difficult to continue to press their advantage there. You can sometimes get like some chip damage. If you think they're gonna Zair, you can sometimes go for Ricochet Cannonball shenanigans, sure. But the fact that that tool allows you to get those combos and continue to act out of it, while being on a character that's heavy, is just an incredible set of attributes to have, all on one character. It also doesn't help that this character's grab is a tether, so in cases where you try to say, I don't know, space against an option, she can just go for grab, and uh-oh, that doesn't work. So, Now we're in a bit of sticky situation in neutral, right? However, there's some key things to note on how K. Rool's projectiles interact with Samus's. Let me just go ahead and pull up Samus here. Let's go ahead and pull up Charge Shot. This move is pretty safe even at low charge with like -16 and also +4. But then we realize K. Rool has projectiles, one of them being very good at zone breaking. The damage threshold that this move can yield ranges from 5 to 26, so there's a span of damage windows where Crown can tank through it and then put Samus into shield. And that's very good, because this character's out of shield game is not horrible. They have up B that's pretty fast. That's frame 4, but if you were to say space your forward air instead, it becomes a much more significant thing to lay on shield pressure, because even when they were to do this, you can just space it and they cannot hit you. Even if they were to mash it and the move is very stale, it would never hit K. Rool. So it forces that typical shield pressure shenanigans onto Samus, which is good. Awesome. There's also the aspect of Blunderbuss that can be played around with, where you can shoot it out from a far distance and run in behind it. So they're going to have to either consider charging more to maybe have the time to go through it, which I believe you have to have it nearly almost charged in order for it to not clank with it, which is the important part here. So it then forces them to then think about their use of Charge Shot more, which is the bottom line I'm getting to. That move is an important part of their kit, and K. Rool can force the Samus to think about using it. Of course, you have your armor to sometimes utilize it there, but the damage output on the move is so high that I wouldn't use it that often. This move is almost able to fully charge, break the belly armor in one go. Like, that is a big ask. Like, you're gonna be maybe taking like a couple hits every now and then, and as a result, it can be seen as effectively a move that can break the belly armor, more so specifically. So I would more so rely on the projectiles to force the opponent to think about their use of Charge Shot more, rather than K. Rool's armor as a result. If they ever try to use Super Missile, by the way, most of the time you'd be able to prime armor through it or just reflect it on reaction, so it shouldn't be that impactful of an option most of the time. There's some situations in terms of like timings where they can approach with it, and at that point it's typical to say dealing with other characters that can approach with a projectile, like Pika. You can go for like a reflect, you can roll, you can jump over it. It's a guessing game. Things get a little bit more tricky though when you get put into a ledge trap situation. So we have this bomb move, right? It's not a very fast option, although it can be kind of spammed at the ledge, and especially off the ledge, to rack on damage and just cover a bunch of options when you're on the ledge. So it can be a bit tricky to get off, even if you were to try and say Crown Armor through it, like, oh, okay, the damage threshold's not enough. You're going to be stuck in hit lag. Samus is going to be able to act before you're able to get the hitbox out and either grab you, hit you with a tilt, smash attack. Not going to have a good time. Similar ordeal you can say for Samus, where the character doesn't really have that great of a means to get around K. Rool using his stuff at the ledge. So like Nair, forward air, just very difficult to contest moves. I believe forward air can trade with Samus' own forward air, if I'm not mistaken. If not, you can just utilize his grounded anti-airs just fine, like up angled forward tilt or up tilt. And they work perfectly fine. Dash attack is also pretty good. And again, if they're using rising aerials, shielding is just fine. You just nair or cover their landing. So yeah, it's a bit of a spot where both can force different kinds of engagements on each other while being able to tear into each other when they guess correctly. So it's a similar spot to Toon Link, where whoever takes the first stock first can take that and gain a massive lead afterwards. Like that charge shot is no slouch at accomplishing that. If they have a fully charged charge shot, it goes through both the projectiles and you get put at the ledge and you eat a bunch of damage now, and that's just... ugh. Alright, I'll talk about it when I get to Trainer. So, Mii Brawler. This character has a lot of similarities to both Fox and Mario, which we'll get to them. We have pretty good boxing tools. Their Nair is really great at laying on pressure, though it is kind of small so we can't outrange it. There's that scope to explore. And, like, their air physics aren't that great either, kind of like Fox. Boxing with him is unideal, as you can imagine, frame 2 jab. And their Nair is -2 at frame 3, oh boy. Yeah, big damage exchanges can be a regular occurrence here. However, the thing here is that this character can be having a bit of like a moveset problem, where you can opt to ban triplats, so their ability to extend off of platforms becomes more of, I need to land like a down throw at certain percent ranges so I can get tech chases, so it's just avoid grab here. And then after other thresholds, you can be more mindful of, say, down tilts or up tilts. Both are not that great, so if you were to, say, position yourself such that you aren't forced into tech chases on them, great. You're not going to probably die from that. And then it moves to position of tech chases with their Nair into up smash. Like, okay, this can spell some issues, as it is more of a regular thing that you may see. Though again, it's a similar thing to Inkling, where you can DI up or down to throw off their timing to force them to be on top of their game. Otherwise, you're just gonna take advantage of their not great recovery. Though it does depend a bit. If you were to say face one that is not using the ideal up special in this matchup, the thrust uppercut. This is a frame 3 out of shield, so that's already a pretty nice boon to have. And it is a move that can kill if you allow them to use it. Though, as again, like I said, suffers a similar sort of issue with Inkling, getting that up throw into up air. They kind of need a platform in order for it to work. So if you were to DI to make it sure you don't land on it, or just remember, hey, I need to avoid this at this percent, you're not going to die to it all that often. So then, if your opponent notes this, they could try and opt to utilize a different special move to help them recover better, as this is more of the issue that would befall the character that K-Rool would be able to take advantage of. After doing that, though, makes it so their means to actually take out stocks vertically is just up smash. And that move isn't terribly fast out of shield. I believe it's frame 9? Oh, it's frame 8, of which K-Rool has forward air and nair. Both are options that are more than able to poke at the shield and then just not be punished for doing so. At least not to that degree, other than like a read maybe. And in that case, then it's not really a great option, it's just sometimes useful. Forcing those guesses, ideal for you to put onto your opponent, right? And, well, K-Rool's normals do just that. And after you throw them off, you can gimp their more of a linear recovery. You could say like, oh, they may utilize the flip jump, whatever it's called. Yeah, this feint jump thing. But something to be mindful of here is that the animation is actually fairly lengthy, and K-Rool is able to just nair through even the kick, and if they were to go out when trying to cover, they just die, of course, but if they go in, K-Rool can just say, I'm gonna nair anyway, and then just bop them away. So yes, it has its uses, but because of the lag of the option, I don't think of it as that great of a tool. It's like saying, because a character can go far, it means that their recovery is good, despite it being contestable. It gives them a little bit more variance, but again, you just tap them once, they might just be donezo. Pokemon Trainer. Now, I'm going to start this off by saying something that a lot of people are probably just going to immediately inflate the comments with, saying, oh, how can this matchup be even if you can be thrown off the level and the opponent, all they need to do is switch to IV and then just down air and we just die. We just get down air looped. However, you need to take into account the other properties of the move. Okay, it's pretty big, right? It's only active for 2 frames and the startup on it is not the greatest. So this move is very susceptible to just simply varying the timing of which you grab the ledge. Also, against these characters that have massive down airs to potentially spike K-Rool through the propeller, you can opt to go to a stage with walls and then just tech it, and since the move has considerable amount of landing lag, see 13 frames here, you'll tech the stage and then just come back while they're stuck in lag. Another thing that I would suggest utilizing against those characters is up air. Believe it or not, King K. Rool's up air can go through every single one of those down airs that can poke through propeller. The disjoint on the move, coupled with the armor, allows this to be true. Even against Ivysaur. Like, look at how big this option is. It's so big, right? So it's like, surely, this must not lose to K. Rool's up air, except it does. Every single time, it'll force the armor to be triggered rather than actually hitting K. Rool, which is just absurd. If you want to recover well against this character, you need to be able to vary all of that. It's a big check on if you are good at recovering. Now, if you do not pass that check, you will get punished hard. But if you have that skill set, you are perfectly fine. But beyond that, we out mid-range this character. They're effectively a sword character, but their moves are pretty slow, and K. Rool does well against swords, so that's funny. They also have a tether recovery, which makes them susceptible to using Ricochet Cannonball, and if they hit us anyway by holding down, we just tech it and then nair them, so that's funny. The real issue of this matchup, though, is more so the other two. Squirtle, which is why I have them down here, which is more the issue, and Charizard. Charizard's in this spot mainly because if they were to, say, try and fish for stocks, which is more of the use case you'll see Charizard use, the sort of approach of doing that yields more commitment than one may think. They have a pretty fast up smash, so that sort of scope I would say is a bit more achievable, although the frame 6 is only right in front of him. Kind of a ordeal with Diddy, and also the hitbox isn't amazingly large, though it is decently sized. We also have back air here, right? It's a frame 14 move, so that's pretty slow. And the move has 20 frames of landing lag. So say you were to be put into the corner, right? And they try to seal out a stock early. Well, utilizing back air there has a very considerable amount of risk. So this move isn't that safe on shield either. It just forces like an RPS, if anything. Like, not very like a leaning RPS. It's more so like an even one. And if it whiffs, well, K. Rool's at a massive frame advantage, because that's 20 frames of landing lag. There's very few moves that have that much in this game. Very, very few. Like, I think K. Rool's back air has less landing lag than this. Yeah, it's 14 frames of landing lag. And it kills similarly well. Like, it's a little bit slower, but it's also significantly safer here. So if you were to try and utilize that niche yourself, I would argue K. Rool can do it a little bit better. Now, the issue more so befalls edge guards in like some regard to like back throw it into back air. Okay, that can kill significantly early, right? However, it becomes a case of avoid the thing. And this is sort of like an attribute I constantly see people undervalue, where if you were to avoid the thing, being the grab at ledge at like 60, then you're not going to be seeing this sort of thing occur all that often. You may see it sometimes because of like a read, or maybe yourself over or underestimating something there. Like, okay, fair enough. But in the realm of odds, which is what is more so what these sort of things pay tribute to, I would argue is not going to happen that often. There's also the scope that Charizard's mid-range is also pretty poor. Where's dash attack? Yeah, dash attack is pretty slow, and it yields like very little reward. It's a really sad dash attack, honestly. Boxing tools, jab is I guess comparable, but like the tilts, sure it's like the same speed, but you have K. Rool's armor, and you just able to tank it and just say no. Also, Crown works here, although it is stance dependent though. Same thing with down tilt. Dash attack is also a similar boat. Oh yeah, K. Rool can also effectively armor up smash too with Crown, so that's funny. Nair is generally the better option they're going to be using rather than forward air. Like, yes, it's in front of them rather than above them here, but the safety on shield is such a huge difference. -14 to -6. It's also the fact that Charizard's forward air is not really that big. K. Rool's forward air is just straight up bigger. And I believe that they trade at worst, if like they space it appropriately, of course. It has that speed advantage, but not much else. You really want range rather in like a mid-range sort of scramble. And since big body, it can be difficult to get off the ledge too. They might switch to the character to survive a bit longer, but I wouldn't bank on it as a result of just being stuck at the ledge. Charizard doesn't have Rock Smash anymore. That move actually helped the character a good bit getting out of the corner since it had armor, and it did so much shield damage and just damage in general. Oh my gosh. Rest in peace, Rock Smash. Let's get to Squirrel now. This is more of the issue. We have a nimble brawler that can rack up a ton of damage really fast, and hitting him is very difficult. From not only is he fast, he's also really small. However, we do have a range advantage, so that's nice. And that weight discrepancy, in combination with Squirtle not having that great of means to actually take stocks, makes this not nearly as bad of a situation to be in. Now, the reason why I have Squirtle in -1, though, is because this character can force tech chases, kind of like what Fox can do, has a kill throw with back throw, so taking stocks isn't actually that unheard of. And the fact this character can switch. Switching literally changes on how you approach the game, so this can make the push-pull motion that the game can typically evoke disproportionate to how K. Rool may want to do, or even characters in general. So you may be like thinking, oh hey, there's this, that going on. Getting off the ledge against him too can also be pretty difficult, so racking on a ton of damage, and those few means to take stocks can sometimes be enough to be helpful. Although overall, because you're going to be using them in tandem with each other, with Ivysaur not being great and Charizard not being great either, puts them a more so of dependence on Squirtle rather than properly using Switch to gain advantages in other areas. Makes the matchup effectively even. You can also say like, oh hey, you can look like, oh Charizard's only slight advantage, Ivysaur neutral, and Squirtle is slightly losing, so the average of that can be there, though typically you'll see from trainers sitting on one of them more than others with respect to the matchup, and doing that in this matchup specifically is unideal though. You have to switch well in order to take stocks more dependably. So you like wreck on damage, for example, throw him off the levels, switch to Ivy, and maybe get something going there. So, the one and only RNG, the character. Hero, my bad. Hero is in an odd spot as well, with him having the spell menu and the side special of his. Worst boxing option, so boxing with him is pretty nice. Playing mid-range is just fine, he's a sword character. But then we get into Zap, Zapple, and Kazap. Zapple is incredible in this matchup. It is a huge option that is also decently quick, covers a ton of space, and it breaks crown armor. This move is effectively this character's forward air in practice, because if you were to look at forward air, it's not really that safe. It's also kind of slow. You're going to more so see this character use their side special to gain advantages, at least in the K. Rool matchup, though I do see generally more so Zapple being used. As a result, we have to think more about our engagements, which then makes us say, oh, okay, we gotta play mid-range and box with a sword character. Cool, whatever. But if we are wrong against those guesses, he's going to race to get different buffs and benefits, either through oomph or bounce. Both of those options, I think there's like a third one. It allows Hero to utilize his aerials more to break the crown armor, and with Acceleratl, it allows him to then potentially do a bunch of whiff punish stuff. And then also like crazy combos too. They do like landing nair into forward air or up air into comprised, so then take stocks really early. It's very much an odd situation to be in. Like, you would think, hey, we can just do typical sword engagement stuff on him. Like, okay, whatever. But then he has menu to just trip you up and keep you on your toes. Additionally, a lot of the spells he's going to be using from menu are able to beat the damage threshold for countering. So if you were to say try and play for the long range exchanges, well, you can't. Like mid-range beneficiary stuff with your projectiles, or just maybe discourage the use of menu, doesn't do anything. They're too slow to hit him. You can just shield it and then just surf the menu again, or just throw out a projectile in reaction. We just get hit. So that's fun. We basically have to actively engage onto him, or he's going to get a bunch of buffs and swing things in his favor. Additionally, if he were to say not do that, he can try to edge guard us too, utilizing his up special. This move allows him to confirm off of it while also being just a massive hitbox, and then we can just die off of it. Like, it can be pretty tricky to come back to stage. Though a similar stance can also be made against Hero too. When Hero is in disadvantage, you can just say, oh, you're gonna get thrown off the level, your scope of recovery is pretty limited. Unless you randomly get a zoom, you are very susceptible to just getting gimped with a funny nair or funny down air. So overall, I think the matchup is in practice even, despite some favorable situations. It's really just a matter of menu management that you need to be mindful of. You really don't want to camp him. You really, really don't. So, Bayonetta. We have a situation where this character can do a bunch of damage, but taking stocks is not that great. Character's kill confirm windows are fairly narrow, especially against a character with incredible sustain. We can live 2% that this character normally wouldn't see for other characters. There is a bit of an issue in regards to recovering though. In situations where we're forced to utilize up special from a low enough distance where they can just react with witch time, then it can spell some issues to potentially lead to like a gimp off stage. However, if you were to call out the use of the option though, oftentimes you're able to get back to stage and then hit them with a funny down air. And yes, K-Rool's down air does at least trade with Witch Twist. Another thing you can also try to use is down smash, as the move doesn't auto snap, so you can just, yeah. Projectiles are a bit discouraged too, as a result of witch time. You really want to play normals mainly. Afterburner kick is the main approach option that the character is going to be using. It's not that fast of a tool. Let's go ahead and pull up Bayonetta here. Amongst your other, boxing is not that great with this character. You get damage, but getting the hit is difficult. Afterburner, aerial. It's frame 7, but they move up. And when they touch your shield, they're actually pretty minus. So, in the event that they're not very right next to you, you can just out of shield them. And even like at the very end of it, like saying, oh, they could be super safe if they hit towards the very end of the move, K-Rool can just up smash them. So sometimes you may see them utilize that to get on stage, but you can just say, I'm going to sit and shield, react to you doing it, and then up smash, and you die at 100. Awesome. Something else to also note is the plethora of alleyways for K-Rool to utilize Crown, to more so use it for that whiff punish element. One may think that, hey, you shouldn't utilize it that much, since if she witch times it, you're going to be taking a ton of damage. But she needs to call that out in order to use witch time, because if she guesses wrong, she's going to die really early. That move has so much lag. 66 frames of total of a duration. It's one of the most laggy counters in the game. It's also pretty slow. It's frame 8. Ugh. Just see reversal stuff when they try to go for it when you're recovering. You're going to be dealt a ton of damage, making it so they just need to guess a couple times to take stocks, but those few guesses are going to be few and far between, giving you opportunities to level the damage field, and then we are in a spot where, oh, either one of you can take a stock here. That's pretty much it. It's not really like a threat of a timeout either. Banning triplats can, like, just make the matchup easier, sure, but she can't really time us out that well. Her air physics are not that great. And utilizing Afterburner in the air, you can only do it once. Unless you hit somebody's shield, then you can do it a second time. Or just someone else in general. Sheik. I think this matchup is even. The reason for this is a similar situation to Bayonetta, where they have a lot of means to rack up damage, but taking out stocks can be more difficult than what K-Rool can do. And K-Rool doesn't need that many wins in neutral against Sheik, even more so because the character is considerably more light than he is. Boxing is unideal, just look at that. Very gross. Frame 3 thing, although the hitbox is actually not that great, so we have that outranging sort of aspect going on. Up special. So the duration of it is actually pretty long. So if you are playing for reactions, you can go for down air and then just snag him for trying to recover. There is a hitbox at the end of it, but K-Rool's down air is big enough to at least trade with it if you're adequate at timing it. Something to be aware of, though, when it comes to teleport recoveries, if they were to grab the ledge from above, they have no window where you can hit them. The opponent's just fully invincible. And in that case, you can sometimes threaten with the option of going for a ledge trump. It's sort of a scope of the game I don't see many people explore. Like Smash 4, you're able to utilize it a bunch since the trajectory, when is sent after a trump, is set. But in this game, you can DI it. However, in that case of DI, no matter what they do, K-Rool will win the exchange. Reason being, after that trump, K-Rool can go for a double jump nair. So on no DI and DI in, it will hit Sheik, and Sheik cannot do anything about it. And if she DIs out, she will not get hit, but she's in a spot where she has to re-grab the ledge, so even if she grabs the ledge from above, she can still be hit when recovering. So react to the teleport, and then spike her afterwards. Bit of a tricky situation that Sheik needs to be constantly thinking about. Another thing to also pay attention to is grenade a bit. So maybe they'll come in and when recovering, or maybe setting up a ledge trap with this move. Plus 28 on shield. It's frame 13 startup and has multi-hits. Uh-oh. This move kind of sounds insane. Until you realize the multi-hits deal no hit stun, and then you can just reflect it and then do a bunch of damage. So this move is not that great, except for like some niches with them trying to come back to stage. In that case, they would toss it out, grab the ledge, and then they'd be in a spot where there's a hitbox and they're just hanging there. Like as if they were following in with a projectile, so they're effectively plus in frame advantage. If you shield it, by the time they get off the ledge, they're not going to be able to do anything with it though. Like, yes, it does do shield damage, but you can angle your shield so it doesn't end up with Sheik being able to shield poke you. It has niches, but I don't think it's that great in practice. If you see him use it, if you know how to play around it, you should be just fine. You can, of course, just nair through it, too, and just ignore the frame discrepancy. Like, why didn't I start with that? But yeah, that is a thing. Also note how Crown goes through 99% of this character's kit, so you can just say, hey, you have to think about your engagements more over and over again. And even if they're right, you can afford to take the risk. Now, why this matchup may not be as great is more so the threaten of that time up potential and chip damage. So Sheik has needles, right? This move is incredible. It's a chargeable projectile, so much like other chargeable projectiles, you can act immediately after starting it. You can do like a cancel thing where you just like tap the shield, but you can of course go for roll, aerial, grab, whatever. But even when trying to use this move at like lower charges or whatever, it's still pretty safe with the move having considerable range. And even in cases where, say, oh, I could maybe crown armor through this, depending on the charge, this may not be the case. At higher charges, it does not work. And even in that case where, say, you want to try and armor through it and, like, call that out, it's a big guess that you're going for here. Except maybe trying to avoid getting killed by it. There's, like, a fairly narrow range where it actually breaks the crown armor. I've only seen it happen a couple times. It might also depend on staleness. Noting from earlier that Crown is a reactable move, though, and that the fact the character can act immediately, you really don't want to be doing that. You're just asking yourself to be being dealt a ton of damage. Like, what are you doing? While you're zoning with K-Rool, don't do that, please. Game & Watch. I get a lot of flack for this at my local scene. Like, there was an instance where somebody asked me what my opinion was on the Game & Watch K-Rool matchup. I said it was even, and I got heads to turn. I'm not ashamed of it, though. I am proud of this statement. And even if I'm wrong, I am not ashamed of being imperfect, because that is the human condition, folks. Don't be ashamed of being you, because being you is awesome. Anyway, Game & Watch. This character is funky. He has a reflector. So utilizing projectiles is not as considerable because of the potential of the options. You also have comparable boxing options, so you really don't want to be in that sort of escape, especially with his up B. I think his up B is kind of crazy. How did I just realize his up special is faster than his jab? Anyway, this character doesn't really have a lot of moves to actually break the crown armor, though. It's a different mix here, with they have a reflector, but not a lot of means to actually break the crown armor, so they have to more so wait and react to you using it, and maybe sometimes call it out from like a bait. But at that point, why would you be doing that? Just do landing nair into something else there, like, okay. Or even just shield it. That'll just cover most scenarios there. Even with that being said, you typically aren't going to be using projectiles anyway. Why is that? It's because K-Rool's mid-range is just better than this character's. It's just better. K-Rool's capacity to perform at this sort of space of the game is evident as a result of him having, at worst, comparable speed to Game & Watch's options, and at best, moves that simply beat out what Game & Watch is going to be trying to do the majority of the time. Game & Watch's grounded threat bubble is what I'm alluding to, is smaller than K-Rool's. They have pretty comparable grounded movement stats, but K-Rool has a range advantage on the majority of his kit. Game & Watch's down air, it's a big move, right? But K-Rool up air bigger. It even goes through this move. Do you think they're going to be spamming it when landing? Fear not, you have a move that goes through most down airs in the game, if not all of them. I'm pretty sure it's all of them. And in those cases where he's going to be in juggles, he can't really sustain to be sitting up there for that long. He's floaty and light, so there's few guesses, kind of like a Mewtwo situation, where the not frequent opposition that K-Rool is going to be using here is going to be more valuable, as the lesser frequency is not going to be as impactful with a character that cannot afford to lose that many exchanges. As the move is pretty unsafe on shield. Like, if you're not confident with the up air, just shield it and then do funny grab, and that works just fine. And dash attack also works too. There's this neutral air, right? Pretty quick, frame 7, so it's a frame 10 out of shield, okay, cool. Or frame 10 at the earliest option due to jump squat. However, K-Rool can play more grounded or force more of a grounded game through throwing out projectiles in the air. Yes, he has a reflector that works in the air, but upon reflecting, most of the time, K-Rool is going to be out of the way by the time it comes back, especially for like mid-range exchanges. So you can force more grounded approaches. His grounded threat bubble is just worse. His dash attack is very finicky. Just look into the motion of it. It's so odd. Well, K-Rool's dash attack is a little bit slower, but also travels farther. and has armor on it, so that's pretty nice to have. Forward tilt's also pretty good in that sort of exchange. There's also the whole squabble of ledge traps that we need to talk about, and Chef is a big talking point. This move is pretty annoying if you don't know how to deal with it. The thing about Chef is that it is a tool that can cover multiple ledge options, sure, but it is very timing bound. So if you were to say grab the ledge at various timings, it can displace what sort of rhythm they may be trying to cover with the pieces here. I like bacon, sausage, whatever you want to call them. As a result of K. Rool having plenty of means to stall off stage, this shouldn't come up all that often as a tool. In addition to K. Rool having a massive get-up attack and up air, as well as crown to just go through some of the pieces and in some scenarios. The move's also pretty slow. It's you can treat it kind of similarly to like Ivysaur down air, another big slow down airs where they have to time it specifically in order to snag K. Rool. Space forward air, it will not allow Game & Watch to hit us if we do that with his up special. Please, please, please do so. The lack of means of this character to take out stocks is also a bit of a weakness for this character, although they can manage this weakness with their ability to edge guard us, so just be mindful of that. You need to be a bit more careful when recovering. I mean, you should be varying that timing anyway to displace their ledge trapping as well. So once you do that, it's perfectly fine. It becomes a game of guessing, and that is what I oftentimes just label as these even matchups. So, okay, let's go ahead and talk about Zero Suit. This is a character that is very nimble, very tricky to hit, but we have a situation where we have a character that does not have that great of means to actually break crown armor. So we can mash this move willy-nilly a good amount of the time, and then just not care. Like down smash goes through it. Up smash, the scoop hitbox, it hits, and then we just sit there and don't care. Forward smash can do it sometimes, but then it's like smash attacks, right? You have to be calling someone out. Also, this move is really bad. Anyway, neutral air goes through. Forward air goes through. Back air, it doesn't. Except it just barely exceeds it, so it's freshness and full hop dependent. Down air is also not great at doing it, but if you connect both hits, it can sometimes, so it depends on freshness. So yeah, we have that thing going for us. Then you may think, oh, this character might not get hit by it all that often, since they're just going to be running away a bunch. Okay. So then we get a situation where they're going to be trying to play for chip, maybe poking with Zair, and maybe getting some chip damage every here and there with, like, Nair, maybe trying to get, like, a combo, but they can't really because Crown says no. And then maybe we get K. Rool also landing a hits occasionally because this character is pretty nimble, so you only need like a few hits to level that playing field. And the weight discrepancy helps that as well, for those fewer hits being needed. Now, things get a bit tricky though when it comes to taking out stocks. Now, K. Rool has more means to do this since he has a bunch of just raw kill moves. ZSS doesn't really have this. Like back air, sure. You can sometimes see them go for down air kamikazes. Like, okay, sure, it does go through propeller packs, so if they get a percent deficit, they can warrant going for, or even a stock lead to just keep that momentum going. So yes, this matchup can be snowball-like. Pressing advantage against this character when they're on the ledge can be difficult too, because of that flip kick. However, edge guarding this character is not that bad as K. Rool. You can limit the horizontal space that this character can occupy, and the verticality to such an extent where you can force a 50-50 that can then lead to you just gimping them off stage. Like, say, you utilize K. Rool's projectiles at like a full hop, or like the mid-level, so like level with the stage. and then either force them to go high, you hit them with that funny forward air, or they go low, and then you hit that funny nair, and they go bye-bye. Now, something else to consider for ZSS, though, is the potential of nair into flip kick at the ledge, as well as tech chase scenarios that forward throw, and back air and forward air can force when you are at applicable percents. At that point, though, we have a situation where we can vary our DI, as well as teching in, allowing us to survive most of the exchanges. So we have a situation like Inkling, where if we DI up, we can utilize Crown to just tank through the thing that they're going to try and use to cover tech options. And we can also just DI down to throw off the rhythm that they may try to evoke. Now, this may sound actually kind of beneficial for K. Rool at the end, until you realize this character is so fast they can play for chip and then just run away. Catching this character can be very hard if they know what they're doing, especially since their full hop and double jump is combination with their flip kick too, makes their verticality, the scope of which they can explore that, very strong, and K. Rool does not have that. So he has to hope he catches landings, kind of like a Toon Link scenario, and just hope he hits that, otherwise he's going to get timed out. And yes, you should auto-ban triplats as a result. If not for time-up potential, but also just ZSS having a better juggling game than K. Rool. Alright, Mii Gunner. We have a situation where I'm going to be assuming they're using the optimal moveset here. Worse jab and overall boxing tools so we can mess them up real bad in that area. And there's not that great, so we can outrange him there. Charge shot is not that great of an option. It's worse, same as charge shot in a lot of ways. They can't really combo off of it, doesn't really kill, and it's less safe on block, with also the other counterplay. So you're going to see a lot more of the grenade launch in this matchup. The grenade launch is very valuable because it can be very hard for K. Rool to get off the ledge once they guess correctly. In addition to just being in the corner, you see this number right here, +6? That is insane, because this is the point blank value number, by the way. So point blank, this move is +6. We can't do anything, and they can just grab us, and we're stuck. Just get thrown off the level again, and then a funny grenade launch over and over again. However, there is some counterplay to this. I mentioned it a bit in the King K. Rool Discord, where I talk about how varying the time of which you try to grab the ledge can throw off when they're able to utilize this option well. So, noting the 32 frame startup on this option, it's pretty slow, right? And the fact that K. Rool has a lot of means to just vary when he's going to be ascending with his propeller pack. Therefore, we have a means to come back if you are willing to grind out those timings. If you're not, though, you can kind of just say GG's right there. It's tricky to figure out on the fly. You have to lab it out. But once you have that figured out, it's nowhere near as bad. And maybe you might see consideration of using Charge Shot, but again, Charge Shot's just not that great. I still think this move has a little bit more going for it. Similar ordeal to missiles with Samus, so look back on that to how to deal with these. And then we get to their up special, Cannon Jump Kick. That is the optimal one in this matchup. Now, it's going to seem very out of place, especially in regards to other established metas for this character, but point being, this gives Mii Gunner the means to play around K. Rool trying to lay on shield pressure against them, because otherwise their fastest out of shield is their up smash, which is not that fast. It's frame 11, it's not that great. Like, they have Nair as well, it's also frame 11. Yeah, but it doesn't cover right in front of them. Like, it starts a little bit behind them, and K. Rool doesn't really have a tool he's going to be using that much to poke at shields, so that this move's going to be able to come into play all that often. The Cannon Jump Kick, though, does have the speed in order to do that, so it makes K. Rool think a bit when he actually touches Mii Gunner's shield. You can also try and utilizing Echo Reflector because of the frame 3 hitbox, which is something that I would suggest utilizing, though for different reasons. And also, in the event that you guess correctly, you are able to level the weight discrepancy and the amount of damage you need to lay on in order to take stocks. But for this, you can do like a little damage and you're pretty minus still. So you're gonna get hard punished anyway. So like, why not try and get like the bigger reward? Like, I don't know. So for this move, I suggest using it as it helps deal with K. Rool's own projectiles, as well as potential of him reflecting Mii Gunners. In addition, it gives the character enough means to warrant using this option for their up special. Reason being is that you can stall with it, so it gives you that additional recovery aid there, but during the use of the option, you can turn yourself around and then use forward air to gain that horizontal distance. So you don't need to spend your jump at all in order to come back. This is something that I would suggest in general Mii Gunner players trying to investigate a bit, as I do think that this is a little bit underexplored. And yeah, I would not recommend using Drop Bomb because K. Rool can just swat at it or armor through it and not really care that it exists. But yeah, I would still say like Missile, because it's something you can still approach with though. For the side special. The reason why I think it's even, we have a lot of this stuff we need to be constantly thinking about, but pressing advantage against this character with this different moveset can be a bit difficult to achieve, with their forward air being super safe and hard to actually contest. It's a disjoint, a projectile, it's -1. It's so safe. And we have the situation where touching their shield can lead to our death, and they have ample means to rack on damage in a ledge trap scenario. So they're going to build up a bunch there, kind of like how the plant matchup kind of goes, where in this matchup though, I would declare it more so even, as I see that the damage output potential value that K. Rool has over plant doesn't really matter here, because landing those hits are more difficult against Mii Gunner than it is against Plant. At least from my experience. I've been more exposed to Mii Gunner play than Piranha Plant as of late, so I feel more confident in that. So, Pichu. This character's damage output and means to take stocks are great. So, right off the bat, it sounds to be not a great position to be in. However, upon using moves, this character does self-damage, and we're facing the lightest character in the game. So factoring in, that makes me think, this is a weird situation where if I were to make a few guesses right here, I could take stocks extremely early. And the same thing goes for Pichu. But landing those hits to get those things going, I think in practice is harder for K. Rool to accomplish, simply because Pichu is so fast. Although, at least from my experience, I have not seen this happen all that often, where the matches don't become very close as a result. Could just be me not seeing that great of representation, at least those are the players that I've played against. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird spot. High damage, but also can die very early. Alright. Megaman. This is a matchup I hear a lot of people saying that we lose, and I can understand why they may be saying this. However, let me add a few things to the conversation to possibly lead to a case for it to be even. So, it's got pellets, it's got a big forward air, and plenty of means to confirm into a kill move, right? Well, what if I told you that most of the confirms that Megaman is going to want to try and utilize, as well as just neutral tools in general, can be tanked by Crown. Even goes for like pellet, does like pitiful damage, so duh. Forward tilt is the same thing. Up tilt, it does do enough, but like, why are you doing that? That move is super minus. You shouldn't be using that unless it's confirmed into. Down tilt, not enough damage. Dash attack, not enough damage. Forward smash, it depends on staleness. Up smash, we can tank through it. And down smash it breaks it. Forward air it doesn't, back air it doesn't, yada yada yada. We have a ton of things that do the armoring, right? But there are some scenarios where being on the ground is what Megaman wants, such as drag down back air and metal blade, and both of those being confirmed into up tilt. Okay, so then it might devalue the use of that to escape being killed. Sure. Alright, but it does limit what the decisions are going to be, though. Therefore, it becomes more of a game of avoid the thing rather than having to think about multiple options. Not inherently so, but it becomes more of that game. Something else to also consider here is that when Mega Man uses his up special, he's actually in considerable amount of lag, and he's very vertically focused as to where he's going to be going. Ergo, we can chase him pretty well when he uses it like that. Granted, it is pretty fast, so sometimes we do need to read it, but in cases where he may be trying to recover, there's ample means for us to cover where he's going to want to go. So yeah, here's Rush, vulnerable, and it's 41 frames of duration. Like, that's pretty long. And that's more than enough time to be able to react to it. So say going for like edge guards, which I hear many people try and say, oh, Mega Man can just down air us, for example. Because of the limitation of horizontal space that Mega Man can go, similar to K. Rool, does that not mean that landing our own down airs on him are also similarly valuable? Yes, there is that speed discrepancy in terms of the sense of their special moves, but K. Rool has a down air that is faster and lingers for a really long time. You see this? It's frame 23. It's really slow. And you can react to the startup and drift accordingly if you position yourself well. So I would argue it's not that bad of a situation as a result. Now, I have seen some people argue the use of Crash Bomb, like, okay, sure, there may be that to be used to sort of convert into it. But then, because of this character's slow means to actually come back to stage, after like, say, a forward air or a back throw, would it not allow us to consider the use of Crown Trump setups? Like the tossing Crown back and then setting it up such that the Crown rolls off the ledge? And it forces him to grab the ledge at more particular timings too, so even in that case where, say, this character has more timings where they can ascend to grab the ledge, you can restrict that from simply using that tool. So then it makes me think, well, maybe it befalls more so neutral, but like I said, we have a tool that makes Mega Man think a good bit on what options they have to use, but there's still situations where being on the ground is favorable for them anyway. So I am kind of like a point where I'm like, I think it's even, and people are just being bad at the matchup, but I keep hearing it's bad, so I'm gonna put it here because I think I might be missing something. If I'm missing something, say something. I mean, Leaf Shield's a similar situation, we can just crown through it. Metal Blade and Crash Bomb, if they're used for like zoning, you can just reflect it as well, similar to him being able to avoid our crown. So I don't know. I don't really think it's that bad. All right, R.O.B. This is an interesting matchup to me because there's an item in play, but instead of the situation we have for Diddy here, where he has a command grab that can force us to not just shield a bunch, we can against R.O.B. Especially the case because his grab is so small. It's so small. Jab and stuff. He is better. Yeah, no, it's a significantly better boxing range. What am I kidding? No. That move. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at that grab. Ugh. It's so small. And even his dash grab is so small. It's so small. So, effectively, you can treat his mid-range as not having a grab. It's still like a sort of a mix-up option you may need to be thinking about, but typically, dash grabs are a strong burst option, but because of how small it is, it really isn't for him. K. Rool has like the better end of the stick here, where they have like pretty comparable movement stats, but K. Rool's dash grab just travels farther and has a bigger hitbox, so that's great. He also has more range than this character. Yes, forward air is faster, but K. Rool's forward air is bigger and yields more reward. And then we have like, back air, they're similarly speedy and safe, and this move auto spaces too, like wow. Until you realize that it still forces you back, so you need to sacrifice positioning. And then makes you think, maybe like cross-ups, but then it becomes a niche. And at which point, K. Rool can just nair and be more safe than what back air can do. So, Now the big point of contention here is his nair, of course, right? It's a big move, and it lingers for so long. Until you realize that it's very slow, so it's not as scary, and especially so because K. Rool up air, his up tilt, up smash, a big old forward tilt. You can armor it sometimes, and you have yourself Crown Rang, which can armor it, and the damage value is not high enough. There's a ton of moves in his kit that have this sort of attribute too, where you can utilize Crown. You're going to be using it for mid-range anyway, and say, they're going to try and dash attack. They hit you and you're fine, and if they try to use dash grab, they're going to cry because it's small. Now, we get to a position where, I am inflating K. Rool up a bit, now I got to bring him down a peg. When both characters get either of their advantages, they can really, really, really take it to home base. It's painful for the other to come back. R.O.B has a really tough time in regards to landing because his nair just gets beat out by K. Rool's common anti-airs, and catching landings with like dash attack, you can just armor it and then bam, you're back in disadvantage. His air physics are not that great either, so the only real thing he can do is possibly delay the timing of which he lands with Robo Burner? With up special, yep, right here, I got the name right. And at the spacing of which K. Rool's vertical threat bubble is more than enough to possibly just swat at him, so it's still a gamble to do that. Of course, you can say like, R.O.B's down air is really big, right? And it can spike K. Rool, except it's slow. So therefore they have to time it specifically in order to actually spike. Yes, it lingers a bit, so the timings of which K. Rool comes back is a bit more to be mindful of, but there's also the aspect of using up air to go right through it, which is, again, very funny. Now, mid-range for this matchup can be K. Rool leaning, like as I stated prior, with dash grab not being much of an issue and Crown being able to tank through most of the options R.O.B's going to be using. However, if he has gyro in hand, he can do a lot of mid-range stuff against K. Rool. Just like poke at him, and then potentially lead to himself getting in on K. Rool. Like, say, going for a tomahawk grab. Like, he has one in hand, he's gonna come down, maybe he's gonna call out that we're gonna try an up air, or up tilt, up smash, him trying to nair us, or something. And instead, he baits that out, and then just hits us with gyro, and he gets dash attack, and there's his advantage state. Or even just general movement, it can be kind of tricky to react to the move when used as an item. There is a small thing about this, though. If we take gyro, we gain all of that stuff that he used to have, and now he doesn't have much of a mid-range anymore. There's also the scope of him charging it, being able to act immediately afterwards, so it's kind of like a charge shot ordeal. Just keep that in mind, see previous details on Samus and like other charge shot characters. And he can combo off of it, so that's also a bit of a concern. So if you were to take this, you were to take gyro away from him, his mid-range becomes substantially worse. Therefore, he gets into a spot where he's like, uh-oh, this could be very bad for me, because K. Rool now has an item. Until you realize that R.O.B doesn't need to guess right all that much, because he has a 0 to death. So that guessing game puts a similar value on each other for having Gyro in hand, and because he's going to have Gyro more, you can say he has more control of the use of the tool. So therefore, you see K-Rool devolving to using Shield a lot in neutral and being more of a turtle, which isn't a bad strategy to use, mind you. But because of that shield dependency, there may come cases where R.O.B lands that grab. Even at like high percent, he can go down throw, mix up into up tilt, or just straight up air, up smash. Just thrown off the level as well, and at applicable percents, there may be spans for which K-Rool can just get snagged by the down air. Mainly because it lingers for so long. That's like the main issue here. Not because it's so big, but because it lingers for a while. It's also not hard for him to take advantage of all the active frames, because when he uses it, he actually stalls in the air. So it's very much something you have to be careful of. The bottom line in this matchup is you need to acquire it. You need to take this Gyro, and once you do, you can be smooth sailing. But otherwise, you're going to have to keep that thought in the back of your mind on him potentially taking stocks early. Which is why I think that it could be a slightly losing matchup because of that ego depletion kind of approach. But if you have the reform to do it, I think it's even. It is very much an acquired skill though, so you do need to grind out this matchup. If you don't grind it out, you're going to get steamrolled. Sephiroth. Now we have a character that has kind of similar boxing options here. We have frame 5 and Gyro's is frame 4, so like, okay, Gyro's a little bit faster, so he can bit more benefited from those close quarters. But we also have forward tilt here that is insanely safe on shield, although in terms of like a head-to-head using forward tilts, K-Rool's will outspeed it, but it's not as safe. So I would say that Sephiroth's forward tilt has a bit more of an edge here, because even in those cases where some moves may outspeed it, there's this range advantage that it has. And even if, like, say, oh, K-Rool armors it, there's a spacing where if Sephiroth does this, K-Rool will armor it, but then it'll just whiff anyway. So it's just something to be mindful of. Yeah, typical down smash stuff. This move does depend on staleness, though, and if it will tank crown, though, so that's something to be considerate of. Same thing goes for back air? Yeah. And forward air, the tip of it. Although this is more full hop dependent, though. And same thing goes for back air. Up air is a similar sort of spiel, but again, it's even after one use, you're not gonna see much of that beating out crown. Now, one may be thinking, okay, we have some options here that allow K-Rool to just tank through these moves with the crown. Okay, cool. Makes the opponent think a bit more about their engages, until you realize this character has this move. Shadow Flare, no matter the charge, will go through crown. This is big, because even in the instance where, say, you can tank it, the duration of this move is like 38 frames. It's significantly less than if K-Rool were to use crown. And plus, the risk-reward is disproportional. Well, I guess I can't really say disproportional. It's kind of even. Even in the case where, say, Sephiroth is a bit slow and he gets hit, now K-Rool has that orb on him that he has to think about, where Sephiroth, depending on like that timer when it goes off, which scales on the orbs, by the way. And there is a visual cue for it if you learn it, though it becomes a little bit more tricky once they start adding them instead of doing a set amount, like 1, 2, or 3, and then just running with that. So I would be very careful about that. So yes, it is a matchup you need to grind out for this main reason here. Although this may be true with the Shadow Flare going through crown and putting up a similar situation for both, where you're in disadvantage, but the flares could just level it out again. There is also the fact that Blunderbuss goes through the lower charges, and depending on staleness, even the higher charges too. So If you were to say try and call out the use of this option, I would more so try to utilize Blunderbuss here. Kind of a similar situation to say against like Samus, where you can approach with Blunderbuss from far away, just run behind it, and then they have to be way more considerate about using Shadow Flare. So we have this back and forth motion, where if the Sephiroth player thinks K. Rool is going to use Crown, he can Shadow Flare. If K. Rool thinks that Shadow Flare is going to be used, he can use Blunderbuss. And then we have like a back and forth, and then it becomes more so devolving to mainly these normals, which Crown can help a bit here, but this range difference can spell some issues. However, armor, right? Having that armor has been a common theme here on making fighting Sora characters much easier, as the range discrepancy is displaced as a result of the effective faster speed that K. Rool's armored moves have. However, Sephiroth's moves are comparable in speed, but also have more range. So we have a point where K. Rool has to use the armor to maintain leverage in order to then put himself towards those guessing games. Now, this may seem unideal, however, I would argue because Sephiroth cannot afford to play as many of those guesses due to how light he is, and the fact that K. Rool has so many means to seal its stocks early, making the use of One Wing not that often, at least not from my experience. I've seen some individuals have a bit of an issue with this, but from what I can tell, I don't think it should happen all that often. The double jump of the character and the sometimes plays that can allow them to force K. Rool to do those few hits, kind of like what Lucario can do, except Sephiroth is significantly lighter, so I would not rely on it nearly as much, while also having worse movement physics, so I don't really think it's that effective if you're willing to play that game against them. I think it could go either way in terms of ego depletion. I can see it here. K. Rool has to think more per given engagement, but he has the ability to explore the areas that he needs to. Like edge guards. Oh, Sephiroth can down air, but it's really slow. And it's also a very small hitbox. You may think, oh, he could just down air, but he really can't do it all that often unless you're riding the stage, which you shouldn't be doing that much in this matchup from my experience. And even so, walled stages can, again, make it so you're not as impacted by it. Just DI in, tech the stage. Sephiroth recovering against K. Rool is a bit of a gamble, since K. Rool is able to try and either threaten the use of down air, to then spike him with his lightweight, allowing him to die extremely early. And there's also the fact that Octoslash can allow K. Rool to just down smash through it, which is hilarious. Man, K. Rool has a bunch of just funny stuff, huh? Okay, Fox is in a spot where I think we more definitively lose against. So, Fox is in a spot where he can do a ton of damage. Unideal, right? Similar sort of situation, I guess we can say like Sora, where he can deal a ton of damage to offset the weight difference that the characters have. And this character also has a lot of means to take stocks, like Pichu. However, we have the insanely exploitable recovery that Fox has. Yes, it can sometimes be mixed up to get himself back, but K. Rool doesn't need to be right all that often in order to take stocks off of Fox. Scrapping with this character can be a big gamble, so you really need to be playing for whiff punishes, and once you get that though, he can be having a bad time. Only in that case though. Of course you have like reads, I suppose, but that's not a good position to be in, ideally. You don't want to be forced to guess. Though, because of the reward we get for guessing correctly being as good as it is, I wouldn't value it nearly as bad as some of the other matchups we have, a similar situation for Fox where taking stocks can be a bit difficult if you were to vary your DI at varying situations where like landing Nair, sometimes F-tilt if they're feeling adventurous. For tech chase scenarios, you can just DI up or DI down and then not be as susceptible. Though I will say, because of how Fox's speed works in relation to the hit stun that the Nair does, can make DIing up not nearly as valuable. So it comes down to mainly hoping that you either DIing not at all or just out, or DIing down to throw off their timing is enough. Though there is points where they can just react to it, so I would not rely on it. I would more so try and force yourself off the level, rather than trying to play around that guessing game. However, if you do this, Fox still has a move that exceeds the damage for Crown. If you played the matchup before, you know what move it is. It's this one, it's back air. It's also very safe on block. If Fox didn't have this move, I would say this matchup wouldn't be nearly as bad, honestly. Because then we would be able to put ourselves in the corner and not be as scared. Like, there's some situations where you could go for weak Nair into up smash anyway, but if you were to DI down in those cases, it becomes significantly harder to do, or at least the range of it becomes significantly smaller. And there's also the reflector that you have to consider here, where this character is super fast. There are threat bubbles like way larger than ours as a result of their movement, but they also have the reflector, so it further discourages the utilization of projectiles. So you really need to be boxing with Fox, which is not good, as stated prior, because this character has really good boxing options. Frame 2 jab, oh boy. Up tilt's frame 3! It does so much damage when you just land 1. Dash attack is frame 4, and it does so much. Like, you can do so much off of his dash attack. This is not the same for Mii Brawler, by the way. Mii Brawler doesn't really extend off of dash attack. Well, Fox can. Does so much. You just get put into a vortex every single time. It really is just playing that waiting game and hoping that your opponent makes a mistake, which isn't impossible, especially considering one is playing a character with such a low margin for error to begin with. So covering landings, for instance, if you were to catch a jump in with up tilt, hit the weak hit, you can cover that and then get that edge guard that way. Yeah, I don't think it's terrible, but it is tough. It is one I would suggest trying to grind out. Okay. Wario. Similar situation to Fox, where this character can do insane damage output and take stocks pretty well. His air drift is also pretty dang good, allowing him to whiff punish us pretty well. Although the range difference on this character can allow us to play to the mid-range pretty well. But the risk-reward, I would say, now so skews towards Wario enough where the few instances that he needs to get those hits in can now get to a point where we're just taking so much and being in such a gross spot to be. Like, Bite can be really gross to have to deal with when coming off the ledge. You can throw it up and then try and, like, using down tilt or go for a ledge trump, down air, down a little forward tilt, threaten that ledge hang, and it forces a ledge option. And if you do it, the bike's gonna come down and then you just get reversal back. The value you get for doing it is just almost always in Wario's favor there. There's still like that guessing game, of course, but it's, again, that risk reward is just a bit too much to really say that it is anything but a slightly losing matchup, in my opinion. We can edge guard and ledge trap him pretty well, though. He's pretty stubby. He does have a command grab, but it trades with Nair. Yeah, forward air outranges it. We have ourselves the typical blunderbuss shenanigans we can do, and he doesn't have the range to really contest the inhale, so that's pretty nice. Yeah, that's really about all we have going for us, though. Playing mid-range isn't awful, but the risk-reward is. Ledge trapping isn't that bad. Edge guarding we can explore a bit. though it can be tricky if he has access to Bike. If we somehow speed up the pace of the game, which is hard to do, considering he's going to want to slow down the game to get more wafts, and he has the mobility to be able to do it and wait. Did I forget to say he's actually sizably heavy here, so he can afford to take more risks? Definitely a weird matchup, but if you were to grind it out a bit more, I can see it like here-ish, like that -1 sort of category. But if you don't grind it out, you're gonna get dumpstered. Okay, so, Villager. Kind of like Isabelle, except to a significantly more difficult degree, simply because he has more alleyways to take stocks. So, a lot of the same overlap with Isabelle, so just listen back on that for some details regarding it. But when we are sent off stage, it can be really hard to come back. Because we're so vertically inclined, it allows him to just simply charge his F smash and then just dunk us over and over again. We can utilize some drift mix-ups, but by the time he sees us trying to go for it, he can release it and then hit us with dash attack into forward air, and that is not fun. Or he could try and utilize Axe if he has it available, which is not uncommon, considering the down special of his is a common tool used for ledge trap scenarios. Something else to also note here is the different side specials that the characters have. Villager's side special is better for neutral because it's covering that horizontal space and threatening the use case that K. Rool may have in that area, which is, again, typically the strong point of K. Rool, being that horizontal plane that he can threaten. And there's also the fact that Villager can follow behind it, although it does have considerable startup though, so if you are playing around that mid-range area and you see him throwing out, just run in and dash grab him every time. It has too much lag. I guess I can also note the random turnips. It can matter sometimes when they try and spike K. Rool, but like, why would you do that when you can just forward smash? So yeah, overall, it's a similar sort of boat to Isabelle, but because this character has more alleyways to take stocks, we have a bit more to think about, and that is unideal. Alright, Joker. This is a matchup where we have a lot of similarities to our attributes, in that our ground movement is pretty identical, except K. Rool has more range, so he effectively has a better mid-range, so that's nice. Long range, I would argue, is a little bit of a deficit because of Joker's faster run speed, and when K. Rool tries to gamble for using the mid-range beneficiaries, which are his projectiles, Joker can either take stage, try and get some Arsene meter, so it may not seem as desirable as one may think. But in the event that they do try and farm Arsene, it puts the preface on you to then get that stage back, which is more than doable, especially if the lag is going to be enduring. And at specific spacings, when he actually takes it, kind of similar to Incineroar, you can just run up and grab him, and then just put him in the corner. Although I will say it's less of a situation that will occur because of Joker's much higher movement stats, so there's going to be cases where Incineroar may have the frames to theoretically get out, but because he's so slow, he's just going to get snagged anyway. Joker doesn't have this sort of debacle going on. There's also the fact that when you give Joker Arsene, there is actually more of a benefit for doing that than a deficit, that I would say. The reason for this is because when you give Joker Arsene, the combos that he can perform are more limited and less damaging than if you were to not farm for Arsene. Therefore, it makes it so the difference in weight that the characters have less of an impact if you were to go and farm for it rather than get it through simply being hit and hitting K. Rool. And when he does that, he gets that less damage output, but there's also the fact that you can hit him off the level and then just down air loop him. Wings of Rebellion right here. So It's invincible frame 1 to 25, okay. But it also ascends fairly slowly. So by the time he's at like mid%, you're going to be sending him far enough where we can react to the ascent and go for downer. So then you may think, okay, maybe you have a point here. Getting downer looped off stage with Joker leads to a bunch of damage, or you can just die off of it. So then I'm not going to get Arsene. Well, my dear viewer, I have something to say about that. When Joker does not do this, yes, he does have more means to rack on damage and level the weight difference here. However, we have a situation where you can throw him off the level. Like, okay, well, he has a better recovery now, right? Remember how I said earlier where tether recoveries are disproportionately vulnerable to ricochet cannonballs? So, say against, like, Min, for example. Joker's the same way. So if you were to, say, throw him off the level and go for such, you can follow up after it and get some early stocks that way. Alright, now I'm starting to paint a picture as to think that, oh, it's not that bad. Until you realize he has gun. That move is incredible. If they made it so you couldn't gun dash, then I'd say that Joker is way more exploitable at being edge-guarded than K. Rool's in this matchup. However, because he can do this, while being invincible for some reason, it gives him the means to come back to stage horizontally without needing to use that verticality that tether recoveries are so bound by. And there's also has that hitbox too, right? Now, yes, you can utilize Crown to tank through the gun, right? Kind of similar spiel to Min. Except when Joker does it, he moves in that direction. So even if he's hit, he's going to be sent up and he's going to be closer to the stage, so he has more alleyways to recover. This is the main reason that puts this character above K. Rool in my eyes. In terms of, like, the odds of winning anyway. And there's also this, too, but yeah, I think enough has been said about this on the internet to make me not have to say anything, right? I guess I can say this one little funny thing about it is K. Rool can up air through it, but only if he's facing towards Joker. If he's facing away, he will not be able to armor through it. So it becomes a bit spacing dependent, and in a game where precision-based spacing isn't as available, I would not bank on it unless you're already in position to do it. And of which case, they shouldn't be doing it anyway if they know the matchup, so I don't really consider it that great of a utility. It is helpful sometimes, just not that effective. Oh, I guess I can note at a shield game, we can poke on him, a bunch of RPSs, but pressing advantage against him as the bottom line is more difficult. Falco. Not as bad as some people may frame it, mainly because this character's recovery is not that great. Similar scenario to Fox. Except we also have a similar scenario where this character can do a ton of damage and take stocks fairly easily. Now, we may see an occurrence of, oh, this character's movement stats aren't as good, so surely, with these reasons, the matchup is significantly easier, right? Because then you can play neutral a bit more and get those hits in. Until you realize this character can edgeguard K. Rool to a meaningful level, which Fox can't really say. There's also the fact that if we were to go to his down smash, you can see that his legs are invulnerable for a very long period of time. Fox doesn't have this. So this is frame 1, 2, 3, allowing Falco to go for more timings to potentially snag K. Rool grabbing the ledge with this move. It lingers for like 3 frames and it's decently quick, so there may be wagers of Falco going for it a bit more than Fox. Fox's legs do become invulnerable, but only after the attack comes out. But for Falco, it's invulnerable even before. So, like, the hitbox on K. Rool's propeller pack is just not big enough to outrange this disjoint. And yes, forward air with that insanely high double jump can spell issues with him being more than able to go as deep as K. Rool, and yeah, it's a bit of a mess as a result. But if you get those few more guesses in, we can push advantage pretty well, so I would not consider it anything worse than this sort of position. Okay, Palutena. This character has a lot of things going for her. That back here is huge and invulnerable, so even if K. Rool were to try and like armor or maybe try to contest the range of it, he's just gonna lose the exchange. That is crazy. Same thing goes for like dash attack. Now, there is a bit of a case to be made for forcing Palutena to play more grounded, with their ground game not being that great, through, say, using K. Rool's own projectiles. Like, okay, cool, you can do that. Until you realize that that dash attack is incredible, right? And you also have to remember that this character's grab is also pretty dang good. Such a good grab. Back here, go ahead and just show that for a little bit. Like, oh, upper body invulnerable. It's so good. And that hitbox is so big. Look at that. It's so big. And go to dash attack. A similar sort of thing happening, where we have upper body invulnerable, and then we have a massive hitbox. It's so difficult to contest. Okay, allow me to elaborate why Palutena's invincible moves are ridiculous. The thing about them is that they have the tendency to eat hitboxes, as this is the difference between invincibility and invulnerability in this game. I may or may not have butchered that in the actual TLDR, but we're just going to ignore that. With them eating even the swings of K. Rool's armored moves, making the whiff punish general weakness of them very easy to exploit with Palu's lower lag, difficult to contest options. Also, Palu's short hop back air can break crown armor for some reason, so have fun with that. So then it becomes a game of rock, paper, scissors, where you kind of have to guess that you are correct, even with you limiting their better tools. With nair, forward air, back air, they're so good. And they can of course just wait something out and cover like a spot dodge with jab or something, or even forward tilt. That's fine as well. The character also has higher movement stats, so controlling pacings can be a bit of an issue. However, if we do get the momentum going, keeping that momentum is not that difficult to do. So let's go ahead and have a look at Up Special, which has a FAF of 67, and you're vulnerable 16, 32. So you can sometimes react to it if you're ready for it. If you are waiting for Palutena to come to ledge and like preemptively short hop, you can sometimes go for downer depending on how far away they are. So it's something to keep in the back of your mind. You can of course use a similar thing against Sheik to threaten going for ledge trump. Oh yeah, I forgot. This character has a reflector, right. So say maybe you're trying to force more aerial engagements since Crown is able to tank a lot of the aerials, right? Like, okay, may consider that. But then they have a reflector and good movement. So it's a bit of a problem to utilize that a bit. You can still utilize it, just not nearly as well against some other characters. The big problem for Palutena, though, in terms of this matchup, is yes, you may have means to rack on that damage, kind of like what K. Rool is going to be doing at the ledge a bunch. Both are going to do a bunch of damage at the ledge. Palu can also do it on stage with like a bunch of nairs and up airs. Our up air can go through K. Rool's nair, by the way. You see like the sides of it, where it makes a sort of an upside down 3. Those protrusions on the left and right side can hit K. Rool's foot and then just make it so he doesn't tank the rest of the move, thus forcing you to space it against a character that has better grounded and air movement. So it's pretty situational when that occurs. So in those situations where you can, the Palu knows that they can just back air you and then not really care. So that's a bit of an issue. Same thing goes for K. Rool though, where he has similarly difficult to contest moves when in advantage. You can just nair. Palu goes, oh, I can try and like nair or forward air, and then they just lose the exchange. So all in all, it more so comes down to the fact that Palu has a lot of means to get those engagements more, and get those reads in to eventually take stocks. One last note though, down throw, after the nerfs that were done, the window for down throw into back air to kill at the ledge is about 5% for K. Rool. So it becomes know thy percentages for which to DI, and you should not be dying to this all that often. After which that 5% it becomes a read, so it's a matter of just mixing up well. So yeah, that's like the bottom line here. It's a matter of number of engagements rather than anything else. Now, I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for this placement, and I understand. This is a character that has a bunch of funky stuff. Foresight can be ridiculous. Pyra can be quite ridiculous too. However, the alleyways for this character to take stocks are significantly more limited than K. Rool's. Now, I'm not just saying that because, Mythra's ability to take stocks is pretty buns, kind of like a situation with Sheik, but I'm also noting the fact that Pyra exists. This character does have range, right? More range even than Mythra, except one realizes that we're facing a sword character. Big sword, awesome, cool. You also have to note that a lot of her moves, if you were to look at the damage values, are like, okay, some of them do break the armor threshold, but they need to be full hopped, and they depend on staleness, with forward air and back air being especially susceptible, and even like up air, to being staled. And yes, I am saying that both of their moves stale together, so Pyra and Mythra up air stale as the same move in the staleness queue. So there's going to be instances that allows you to just force your way through stuff by just pressing crown against Pyra here. This character has pretty comparable movement stats to K. Rool while also having that comparable range, except sword bad against K. Rool. And there's also the fact that the safety on forward air, back air, and neutral air aren't that great, even down air, especially considering that their fastest option, being jab, is frame 3. Because that this is frame 3 rather than Mythra's frame 2, and this is like a similar situation where Nair is -10, and forward air and back air, like -7, sure, but you can parry it and then make it -10, like this move. Therefore, Pyra doesn't have the speed to threaten K. Rool just mashing grab if they aren't spacing it. Just run in, shield, and then mash grab, and then K. Rool's able to just grab them. Now, yes, if it's perfectly landed and fresh, you technically have the frames to trade with K. Rool's grab. But that is assuming the perfect condition, which is not going to happen all the time, especially in a human versus human world. So effectively, K. Rool is able to mash grab when running in and shielding, which is just kind of ridiculous against Pyra. There's also the fact that since she doesn't have foresight, K. Rool can get away with using projectiles to force different engagements and pacings. So it becomes a game of, yes, Mythra's going to do a ton of damage, but once sealing out the stock comes in, it's going to be an uphill battle until they get that lucky guess. Now, this sort of phrasing makes one think, oh, this matchup may be even. But then I'd say to you, what? Because Pyra's ledge trapping is actually pretty good. It has a huge range advantage against K. Rool, and if he guesses wrong, he can end up just dying there. Despite him being pretty heavy, that weight difference can be dampened, and at least from my experience, that high damage that can be outputted by Mythra can force him so far to not allow him to utilize up air mix-ups that much. And since there's such a slow ascent for K. Rool's up special, you're not going to see them missing down airs all that often. So that's why I have it here. So in the event that they somehow guess right, which isn't impossible to do, it's very hard for K. Rool to come back after it. But if K. Rool's having a good day, this is fine. This is perfectly fine. Greninja. Greninja is in an interesting situation where we can push advantage against him but we have a sort of odds issue, an overarching problem here, where yes, we can tear into them, but gaining access to what we want is a bit of an issue. It's like a reverse of what I see these winning matchups up here being. So we have a character that has insane jump heights, so we have like a Falco situation. Really good juggling. Their mid-range is okay, their dash attack's good, but their dash grab is pretty bad. So we have a R.O.B situation, a mix of like R.O.B and Falco here. And there's also the elements of playing for edge guards. Now, in cases where Rool gets a % lead, it is not unheard of for Greninja to run off and play for the stock trade, kind of what ZSS is going to be doing, although to a much more consistent degree, as if it doesn't trigger, Greninja doesn't just SD. So you really need to be on top of your game, and even then he can just level the playing field. It's not a bad situation to be in, but it also still means that if we get into a deficit, he can fish for that, and then that's GG's. However, Greninja's recovery is also exploitable. Especially up special, it's frame 19 startup. That is pretty slow. So if you were to position yourself to be able to react to it, you can either wager going for a trump or going for a down air. Especially considering the character's ledge grab range is pretty small, and even smaller when using his up special. Like, look at this. This is super small. It's like a negative disjoint going on here. That is pitiful. So I would very much recommend trying to grind out the timing of that. Another thing to consider is that Greninja doesn't have many alleyways to break the armor of Crown here. You have forward air, but it's staleness and full hop dependent. Nair doesn't, back air doesn't, up air, you're not really going to be doing that, down air, not really going to do it, but a little bit more, but still doesn't. If you look at the tilts, it doesn't. If you look at dash attack, that also doesn't. So it really becomes a situation for neutral where it commands respect, but the verticality that Greninja has over Rool, as well as just having better ground movement and better risk reward for those engagements, gives him an edge in neutral for those reasons, right? But if we get leverage, we can still make him explode, which is like the big boon of making it still fine if you grind it out, but undesirable if it comes about in bracket, right? Captain Falcon. We have a situation where this character is so much faster than us on the ground and in the air, while having insane damage output and having plenty of means to take out stocks as well as exceed the damage threshold for Crown. This sounds really bad, now doesn't it? However, it becomes a similar situation to, say, Fox and Falco, where if we get them into disadvantage, namely that edge guard, we can mess him up pretty bad. Falcon's recovery is pretty exploitable. At worst, the situation is going to lead Rool trading with his Nair, kind of like with Diddy and his flip jump. Well, it's like monkey flip, I should say. We also have a weight advantage. Except Captain Falcon has insane damage output to offset that, while also some alleyways to 0 to death. That is quite something. So what do we have in order to offset this? Well, we have the armor removes, as well as the range to offset the speed that the character has. So we get to a point where playing for whiff punishes, and it becomes a situation where we can avoid conditions where Falcon can go for the 0 to death kind of exchanges, as well as insane damage output. Now, you're still going to be constantly on a back foot, so I would see a lot of matches often just go to last stock, but Rool is going to oftentimes still lose them. If you have a good day with reads, though, you can do it. If you have the headspace or the analysis to realize what sort of pacings or desires the opponent has, which isn't impossible considering human beings aren't inherently random, I can see it be here. If you don't grind it out, though, it is absolutely awful. Awful. You're gonna get destroyed if you don't grind this out. Yoshi! This matchup is a similar situation to, like, Greninja-ish. Actually, it's more so Wario, I should say. It's a similar situation to Wario, where they have Command Grab to sometimes help with armor, but the thing with Yoshi is that it's actually disjointed, so it helps a bit more. There's also the fact that we have lots of juggling damage, just general damage output, and we also have the tech chases we see from down tilt and nair, kind of like Fox with his forward tilt and nair. So you really need to be careful about that sort of thing when applicable percentages are there. He also has very, very good movement, especially in the air. So trying to brawl with him in the air is a big ask. So you're going to typically see K. Rool playing for catching landings a lot, which is unideal against a character with insane air physics. Those with poor ones were able to catch landings a-okay, but that drift is so good. It's such a good drift. And even with that drift, he also has that command grab to just beat out dash attack or dash grab, so it becomes you trying to play more off of the potential of you swinging, which is putting the dice roll on you rather than your opponent, and that is unideal, right? However, we have a situation where this character can struggle a bit to get out of the corner thanks to their large frame, and the fact that they don't have many alleyways to auto-snap the ledge, while also having not many means to cover their ascent. Like, yes, they can use Egg. I can see a case for it. Except for the fact that K. Rool has armor on the front of him when he down airs, right? So, there are spans of timings where K. Rool can go for down air and then not really care about the Egg coming at him. So that can be a bit of an issue for Yoshi. And there's also the fact that Yoshi can explore edge guarding well, too, against K. Rool, since he can go as far as he can off stage. So that's a bit of an issue. All in all, again, you're going to lose neutral a bit more often. He has a bit better punishes in some areas, namely that juggling department. But when you get the ball rolling, you can put in a lot of work. Just got to be willing to wait for it. If they're willing to wait for it, though, it's a struggle. Squirtle, I already talked about you. Aegis, already talked about you. Peach, this is a similar situation where denying aerial approaches can be pretty nice. I would be saying that if the character didn't have one of the best attributes or moves, rather, in this game. Float. Remember how I said that Shulk can maneuver around denying of jumps through his speed Monado, but it is resource dependent? Peach can do it far more frequently. They can just spam that dang thing. It allows them to effectively have their aerials as grounded boxing options. That is just incredible. And the damage output in this character is so high. And if they know what they're doing, they can 0 to death us. Oh my gosh, this sounds awful. Until you realize we have a massive range advantage, especially in that mid-range. So we have a similar situation to other Touch of Death characters, where we have a lot of means to explore it, and they have massive damage output, but Peach has an item that allows them to do that, while all the other characters have to get up close and personal. It's tough in this matchup. It honestly is. If you can somehow discourage their use for pulling turnips, which isn't impossible to do, considering the startup of pulling the turnip is actually pretty sizable. Yeah, boxing you really don't want to do. So it's a 39 frame total animation. That's pretty sizable. And there's the fact that K. Rool's crown can tank through most of the turnips. A range in the damage, but most of them we are able to tank through. But there is that off chance that they get a dot eye, or a stitch, or a winky turnip. I don't know how to really say it. Where it can be a bit of an issue. Oh, the damage values are all skewy here. Why is it? No, it doesn't do 88.7 damage. Hello? Anyway, So even in cases where you try to force them slowly back, there's that chance that they get a turnip that's able to break crown armor. And that can be a big issue if floating wasn't enough for you. Now, if you were to put them off the level though, them getting back on stage is pretty hard. Their recovery is good. I'm meaning getting like specifically off that ledge. So since this character is so floaty and doesn't really have the greatest tools to threaten K. Rool's massive range, K. Rool can keep him there for a good while and rack on damage. And since this character is so light, you can get to a point where, in theory, you could level the playing field, but I'd say in practice I wouldn't really claim that because of just the scope of which the character can explore their crazy damage output is far more accessible due to their float and turnip. And just having a better recovery in these characters. Like, why does Peach have a significantly better recovery in neutral than these characters? Like, I don't get it. Oh. Let's get to the last three here, because these three are the big three. If you are considering getting a counter pick for K. Rool, make sure that they can do well against these three characters. If they don't at least go even, I would not suggest using them. Unless it's like, you don't really see some of these. Like, Meta Knight is pretty rare, I suppose. Mario can sometimes be rare depending on the region, as well as Pika. Pika more so, I would say. If you have any relevant individuals in your area, or are thinking of becoming a top representative of King K. Rool, I would work towards finding an answer for them. So let me explain why they are K. Rool's worst matchups. Let's start with Meta Knight. We're in a situation that may not seem as bad, right? We have a sword, we have a better mid-range, as a result having us more range, and a better threat bubble, until we realize that if we make one mistake, we die. I'm not kidding. The thing about Meta Knight, and why he's perceived as poor as he is because of the consistency issues with his combos. This issue is not present on big-bodied characters. And when they start to work, you stop playing the game. There is some counterplay you can do by forcing the Meta Knight to deal damage in less extreme form to possibly give you the means to DI or SDI out of them. But if they're smart enough to know that they just should wait, then you kinda are in a very risky spot here. It does force them to play a bit more to what you can predict, so that's nice, getting those advantage states. Like, oh, K. Rool must have a very good advantage state here, right? His ledge trapping is amazing, his Nair can just go through everything. Yeah, no. Meta Knight has probably one of the best disadvantage states in the game because of his multiple jumps and his down special that allows him to teleport around with very minimal lag. And if you guess wrong, you can just die from it too. Incredible tool to have. Alright, Dimensional Cape is 34 frame startup. Okay, it seems kinda bad, right? Kinda bad. Until you're vulnerable frames 12 to 32. Oh. And then else you cannot strike at all. And Meta Knight can drift really far after teleporting, so you have to guess where he's gonna go. And now, if you guess wrong, you're in disadvantage against a character that has one of the best edge guarding capacities in the game. So even if you play your heart out to best the odds and not die at 0, and he's willing to play for those small engagements, you're gonna be thrown off the level at high percent eventually, and he's gonna just edgeguard you anyway. Wonderful. The only saving grace we have is like turtling, where him getting onto us can be a bit of an issue, like I said at the beginning here, but it's just not enough. Mario. This is a similar situation to Meta Knight, where he can deal a ton of damage as well as kill us at 0 if they know what they're doing. Now it is a bit more dependent than Meta Knight as to the scope of which they can explore this. However, they cease to know of one character's specific option that everyone keeps forgetting about that allows him to play neutral just fine. What some K-Rool individuals, including myself, originally thought wasn't that bad. We can like wall him out pretty well. Like we have more range. Cool. Let's just go abuse that. Until we realize he has this Flood. It's a charge shot scenario where if we try to wall him out with our armored normals and even Crown, he can just push us to the corner and then not care about our attempts. Great. Doesn't even need that much of a charge to really explore this. Then you may think, oh, okay, well maybe we can edgeguard him more. Like, sure, we can. Although it is not as great as, say, like Roy, for example. They have like similar recovery arcs. Simply because the hitbox on this move is faster, you have invulnerability, so it can sometimes throw off some things, though this is a bit of a niche statement to make. But there's also the fact that he has a dedicated stalling tool with the reflector, the cape here, which also helps in neutral, by the way, of which he's able to kind of just say, I'm going to stall a bit and then just not care. You have to guess right here, or I'm going to put you in disadvantage against a brawler in the corner, which is where they can do a ton of damage to help offset their range. Like, oh man. So many resources on the internet from notable individuals that will say the only real weakness of this character is range. And that's all I can say too. We can outrange him, and that's really it. Okay. Alright, Pika. Remember how I said that Meta Knight can 0 to death us, although it's like a little bit of a dependency. Mario has a little bit more of it. Pika doesn't have that. Back air. Among other tools too, but back air. It can be really tough to deal with that sort of aspect. There is an underdeveloped approach to this though that makes me think, in theory, it's not awful. Mainly because K-Rool can footstool dare Pikachu, which is pretty nice. It's a pretty nice thing to have. I would be saying that though if it weren't for the fact that when K-Rool does it, he's minus at most percentages. So most of the time you're gonna more so use the footstool to just disengage and then try and play for a different scenario rather than landing the down air outright. Back air is, it's something. But even then, like, okay, we have a range advantage, so like against Mario, cool. So it must not be horrible to avoid, right? Except Pika has insane mobility, and one of the best whiff punishing tools in the game, being quick attack. And like, okay, well maybe we should play more so for turtling and maintaining that positioning that we may have to fight a lot for. Like, okay, sure, I agree with you on that. If it weren't for the fact that Pika can just camp with T-Jolt. That's a bit tough. The only real redeeming quality I can really say in this matchup is the weight difference. Meaning that we are not as needed to make as many correct calls in order to level the playing field. I would be saying that if Pika could just not allow us to use Crown, or just take the Crown away and then 0 to death us with lightning loops. Yeah, I don't know how we're supposed to fight this character if the opponent knows what they're doing. It's such a tough one. You really can't edgeguard this character either. You know, like the value of like, hey Mario, you can edgeguard him, cool. Like, these two are awful. You can argue this character being to not be as bad, but I think the range of which he can explore his punish game is notable enough, while also having Flood to be fine in neutral. In fact, even have a winning exchange there as a result to just be not great. Having that reflector too is also pretty nice. It's not a huge game changer, but it is a nice asset to have. And finally, I finally went over all of them. Okay. Oh my gosh, this took like 7 hours to record and stream. Remind me not to do this sort of thing again because it takes so long. Gosh. And I probably missed something too. There's just so much information. If you guys really want to talk about this sort of thing in more detail, feel free to just say something in the community Discord or just send me in DMs and I can say my word on it. I know a lot about this game, and sometimes I forget that I know some things, and so yeah, if you are interested in, say, even seeing a dedicated matchup guide against certain characters to have like different nuances, pay tribute to, say, like Steve, there's a bunch of small things you can be abusing against him that I didn't all talk about here. Like, for example, I didn't mention that Blunderbuss is able to send Steve inwards when he's in his cart, which is hilarious. It's just a whole bunch of funky stuff you can do. Like, I've been saying like a bunch of funny things, but I haven't really said like half of it. There's just so much this character you can do. You can just do as a result of just being weird. Anyway, that's gonna be it for me. Drop a follow or sub or whatever you do nowadays. And yeah, that'll be it. Yeah.